evening, everybody, and welcome to our Left Takeover Seize the House live stream, where you're going to meet all kinds of incredible non-corporate candidates who have disrupted their lives to step up and try to do something good for the country. So I'm really excited to hear from all of them. I am one of your hosts for the evening, at least for a portion of the evening. For the stream tonight, we have over in this corner, Briahna Joy Gray. She is host of the Bad Faith podcast. She also is former press secretary for Bernie Sanders and worked at The Intercept and did all kinds of other wonderful things. You guys all know her and love her. We have over in this corner, Julianna Forlano. Our first time with Julianna joining us for these streams, yes, so very excited to have her. She is host of Act TV's Act Now, and welcome to everybody who is watching right now on Act TV, by the way, and thank you guys for supporting us there. We have over here Katie Halper. She is co-host of the Useful Idiots podcast and also host of the Katie Halper Show, which you can find on YouTube and Patreon and all of those places. And right here, the woman who inspired this evening, who requires no introduction, the one and only Marianne Williamson, of course, former presidential candidate, and you all should be subscribing to Marianne's Substack, which is mariannewilliamson.substack.com, and I'm co-host of Breaking Points and co-host of Krystal and Friends and all that good stuff. Marianne, you really led the charge in terms of getting this stream together and saying, listen, we need to do something. We can't sit around on our duffs and hope things get better. We need to back people who are stepping out into the void and trying to do something out there in the country. You have selected these candidates because you think that they represent a different direction for the Democratic Party, but for the country at large. Could you just tell people a little bit who these people are and why you think that they are so worthy of everybody's support?
I'll be glad to do that. It was a little over a year ago that I began endorsing candidates, working with my friend and a bit of a mentor, Howie Klein, from the Down with Tyranny blog that I'm sure many of you read. And I had felt, after I myself ran for office, that I wanted to, in whatever way possible, continue to support the issues, the policies, the topics that had meant so much to me when I ran. Because these issues matter to millions of people. And what is particularly frustrating for many of us now is that when it comes to something like Medicare for all, the majority of people want it. When it comes to free college, the majority of people want it. When it comes to canceling the college loan debt, the majority of people want it. When it comes to a more righteous foreign policy, the majority of people want it. When it comes to a Green New Deal, the end of the terrible environmental crisis, the majority of people want it. Also, a majority of people in the United States have begun to understand that it is a matrix of corporate entities that have undue influence on our politics, on our government, primarily because of the money that they spend. And as a consequence, the issues that are so clearly what Americans want are not necessarily the issues that are on the table and turned into policy. Well, so you ask yourself, well, why is that? Why is it that the will of the American people is not being represented in Congress? Theoretically, in a representative democracy, that's what would happen. People would go to Congress and represent the will of their constituents. Too often that does not happen because our Congress people are representing the will of their corporate donors. Now, the problem is not that we don't have incredible people in the United States who would know how to change policies. You hear people say all the time, our problems come from bad policies and they could be changed and solved by good policies. But too often, the people who would go to Congress, who do have the expertise, who do have the skill, who do have the knowledge, and would know what to do if they could just get in there, are not in there because they do not have the kind of establishment support, specifically corporate financial support, that would help them do that. Too often, people are there because they are supported by corporate donors whose profit maximization is contradictory. It's in contrast to what we know to be the will of the people. How do we override this? We override this by voting. There are a lot of other different ways we work on this as well. But it's so extraordinary to remember that women didn't even have the right to vote in the United States until 1920. The Voting Rights Act was in 1965, dismantling the worst aspects of segregation in terms of the suppression of the vote among black people. And then in 2013, the Supreme Court began gutting the Voting Rights Act. That's why we have all these voting suppression efforts all over the country. but there are a lot of different ways that they suppress the vote. Not only in the ways that we all know about, coming out of state houses, unfortunately, all over the country, but through these financial shenanigans, and unfortunately, the establishment forces that work within both political parties that too often peripheralize the kinds of candidates that we're talking about here tonight. So all of us have podcasts and work that we do, putting out information all the time. I love the badass panel that we have here. And the people that you will hear tonight, specifically in answer to your question, and this is where I really hope that you will look at your site and look at that donate button at seizethehouse.com. These people, by definition, do not have corporate support. And one of the things that Krystal already said, it's hard to run for office. It is brutal out there. And particularly some of these people, they are so good. If they were in Congress, they would change things. But getting there is difficult. And when we have to support them is right now during these primaries. So if you go to seizethehouse.com, or if some of you have already given, I want to thank you, have been supporting at candidatesummit.com, they go to the same place, you will see a whole bunch of progressive candidates. They're fantastic, and each of them have a video under their name. Not all of them could be with us tonight. We only have 3 hours. When you donate tonight, I just want to say this before I turn it over to my friends here. When you donate tonight, if you go to the donate button, there's a box at top, which means I just love all of them. Here's my money, and just distribute it evenly. But also, if you see some people here tonight, or if you see others on the page whose video you particularly respond to, and you want to give to them individually, feel free. Please don't think that any amount is too small, because a lot of people are watching right now. Your $5 does matter. Your $10 does matter, or however much you want to give. Up to $2,800 would be the legal. So you do what is right for you. Anything you give is appreciated. And I think when you hear these candidates tonight, you'll know why all of us have faith that if we get them to Washington, they'll change this country.
And I do think it's important, one thing you said there, which is that there are a lot of other this is not a comprehensive list tonight that you're going to meet of the great candidates that are out there. These are just the number that we could fit into this live stream. Mm-hmm. Bri, I wanted to ask you, we have all had our political hearts broken more than a time or two at this point. And there are a lot of folks out there, some of whom may be watching the stream right now, who say, you know what, I just don't believe this is going to work. I don't think it's going to matter. I don't think it's going to change. I believed in the squad. They haven't, we just saw AOC this week, unwilling to even say a word against Nancy Pelosi in an interview. I just don't know that this direction is a fruitful use of time. And some people would even go further and say, in fact, by even backing people in Democratic primaries, you're sort of bolstering the Democratic Party and channeling people into a Democratic Party that does not deserve their support. So let me ask you personally, because you're sympathetic to that viewpoint, why are you here?
Well, that's a $64,000 question, $100,000 with inflation. And, it's something that I think the candidates are going to have to answer as we talk to them tonight. The refrain that we've gotten, and I will say, you talked about heartbreak. I was covering the 2018 midterms for The Intercept. I was there the night that AOC unexpectedly won her primary in a huge bar in Queens that was empty with maybe 20 people in it, and suddenly was packed to the gills with Cynthia Nixon and all these cameras and everything. And it was exciting. We really thought things were going to change. I was on the bandwagon, right? And so when I have offered the critiques that we've all been making over the course of the last couple of years, it's coming from a place of sincere disappointment, not kind of, haterade.
Yeah.
And so when I reflect on these candidates, which seem, as promising in some ways as AOC, I think it's really important to ask them specifically whether or not they would be willing to take the kind of adversarial attitude that we expected from AOC and other squad members. Because what we've seen is that some of these biographical things that we thought were going to mean a lot didn't pan out quite the way we expected. I have a lot of respect for, certain positions that someone like Cori Bush has taken. I have a lot of respect for the kind of life she's led and the choice to pursue politics when she was experiencing homelessness in a very recent past. At the same time, we know that is not a one-to-one ratio in terms of how they're actually going to behave when they're in the House. So I think of this Livestream is an opportunity to ask the questions that I think a lot of viewers have on their minds, and to hear what some of these candidates think about how elected Congress people are behaving now and what they would do differently if they were in their shoes.
Yeah. What do you think, Katie?
Well, I think that, we live in a particular system. I think that none of us here, sitting here, would say that that it's controversial to say that there's a lot of moral compromises that we see our politicians making, that they've made some disappointing decisions. I think that's obviously true. The question is, what is to be done about it, right?
Yes.
And I'm not opposed to third parties, but I don't see anything right now that's a viable alternative to trying to work an inside and outside strategy, right? So we do it. Nothing's going to be solved through electoralism only, right? We know the famous FDR quote, apocryphal though it may be, of "Now go ahead and make me do it," which he said to A. Philip Randolph when he wanted labor rights and civil rights to be passed enacted by FDR. The truth is, I understand there's a lot of frustration. I don't know what the alternative is. I totally respect people saying that they're going to put their time, money, and effort into things that are not electoral politics. That's everyone's right. I certainly think that these things can't act in a vacuum. If you don't have the movements forcing politicians' hands, nothing will get done. But it certainly makes a difference when you have the politicians in there whose hands are cleaner than others. So that's kind of how I see it. And I think that if people, again, if you don't believe in this, then you should be doing a stream about some kind of collective
other project
organizing, mutual aid.
Yeah.
And I will say, I'm a strong supporter of third parties. People have heard me talk about it.
Yeah.
We've talked to Jill Stein on the show, Andrew Yang on the show, talking about the Forward Party, and on and on and on. And I think it can be a both and, especially as those third party efforts are getting off the ground. And there are candidates, at least one candidate tonight, who previously ran not affiliated with the Democratic Party, who is now running as a Democrat this time. And I look forward to asking her what that decision making is about, because I've had people on my show who've said, I would love to run third party, but here are the specific barriers to entry that I experienced as someone who isn't as running as a Democrat. My inability to collect money through Act Blue and all these other kinds of things that are disadvantaging candidates that are already at a disadvantage because they aren't taking these corporate funds. Right. It's a difficult question. It's something that I'm wrestling with, how much to invest personally and financially in different kind of candidates. But I don't think inaction is the best course of action. Right. And so I hope that people are able to vet and consider what their options are via this panel tonight.
I think that's really well said. We don't have the luxury of inaction. I mean, we don't have the time to wait around and hope that there are better alternatives available. These are the pathways that are open right now where we can get some people who would participate in this conversation and have the very same viewpoints and the very same skepticism. Yeah. And Julianna, I would say that, we have had, I don't want to say that it hasn't mattered at all that the squad has been there. When Cori Bush slept out on the steps of the Capitol and forced the extension of the eviction moratorium, we see, I think, pretty regularly on foreign policy, some courageous voices that were never there in the past when it comes certainly to Yemen, when it comes to Afghanistan and other issues. But I actually think if you want to look for an example of where electoral politics really made a difference, look at the Tea Party. There's no reason that leftists in Congress can't have the same sort of willingness to buck the media, buck leadership, force them to do their bidding as, the jerks who got elected during the Tea Party, which happens to be when I ran for Congress.
Absolutely. And as someone I respect greatly said, the people who these folks are running against need to be replaced. And that is a direct Marianne Williamson quote. It's we've been pushing them. I cover a lot of activist movements, activism on the ground. We've been pushing the people who are in there, and we need people who are in there who understand what activism is, takes it seriously, and are willing to be pushed.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at Black Lives Matter movement, it's the largest protest movement that's ever existed in the history of our country. And it has not been followed by one major fundamental legislative change. So a lot of these people aren't pushable. I mean, as long as you have the kind of undue influence of corporate money that you have in our Congress right now, a lot of these people who are there, particularly these people who have been there for 10, 20 years, they don't really care that much how much pressure is being placed upon them, because that's not the pressure that they're responding to. They're responding to the pressure of the corporate lobbyists that are in their office all day, every day. And I think what Krystal just said is so important. it breaks my heart sometimes when I see so much more audacity on the right and so much codependency on the left. Like whatever, I'm sorry. And I think when you're talking about the squad, when AOC said yesterday, when asked if Nancy Pelosi should still be Speaker, and she gave this answer about how one day there will be a generational change. We don't have one more day to wait.
Today.
And I hope that all of you who are listening tonight will feel that this is the day for you to take action. Once again, please don't forget that donate button. I hope that, my hope for this evening will be that all of us expand our sense of citizenship. I know that sounds a little bit corny, but I think we need to see conscious citizenship, active citizenship, as part of what it means to live a well-lived life, what makes life meaningful.
Yeah.
The French say, if you don't do politics, politics will do you.
That's it.
And God knows politics has done us, so we need to do politics now.
That is it. I mean, we can't afford to neglect any of these potential avenues because the conditions and the stakes are so dire and the stakes are so high. So it has to be a reinvigorated labor movement. It has to be activists and movement building, and it has to be people who are in positions of power that are ideologically aligned and open to being pushed by those movements so that they actually respond.
Well,
when the pressure
the
is
people
brought.
we're talking to tonight, you won't even have to push them. Just get them in there. They are the people who have been spending their lives doing the pushing. And these people will impress you. But listen, let's not apologize for the vote. Let's remember that people have died so that others could vote. Look at what the women suffragettes went through so that women could vote. Look what the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King and others, went through, struggled, sacrificed, even to the point of their lives, so that black people could vote, among other things. So I don't feel like apologizing for the importance of voting tonight. A lot of the passion and the invigoration that you see in the labor movement right now, for instance, let's put it here too.
Yes, indeed.
I think it's time to get started, don't you think so?
Yes, I think
okay,
so.
Bree, you're
Bree,
first.
you bring in our first candidate.
All right, I'm hearing that our first guest is here. It's Jason Call from Washington State, who's running in the 2nd District there. Welcome, Jason.
Jason, we need some
hear.
sound.
I could kind of lip sync that it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really proud of myself for being able to figure out.
Oh,
Okay, there you go. All right, we can hear you.
Are we back? Okay, good. Thank goodness, because I thought we had it all worked out. Briahna, we met each other in the parking lot of Nina Turner's campaign.
That's right.
So it's a pleasure to talk to you again. So I hear you've got questions for me. I'm excited to talk about my campaign.
I do.
I want to answer questions.
I first want to ask you, I watched your campaign video and I see that your commitment to Medicare for All is a personal one. I wanted you to introduce yourself to the audience by talking a little bit about why it is so personal to you and what you see your role as being in the movement to enact Medicare for All in this country.
So thank you for that. Yeah, it is hugely personal to me, and I say that the story I tell is the story that millions upon millions of people in this country tell. My mother was denied a post-routine surgery stay. She did not feel well. They wanted to send her home. She didn't want to go home. She ended up being forced to go home, collapsing, going back in the hospital. And the last 10 years of her life were she couldn't work. She spent months in an induced coma, had to learn 2 years to learn to walk again. And then she went from being a working woman who had a good quality of life to having the last decade of her life really essentially ruined by the insurance industry. And I don't ever blame hospitals or doctors or nurses. They are the real caregivers in this country. They are providers. The insurance companies are simply parasites who are there to profit off of suffering. And I want to shut them down. The reality is I support Medicare for All. At the federal level, we do not have enough support. The person I'm running against in Washington's 2nd District has said over and over and over again, he will not support a single payer system. The people in my district want it. They recognize the need for it. And I'm on the board of a group called Whole Washington that I'm sure you've heard about. And we're trying to get state single payer here in the absence of a federal bill. But the federal bill is the gold prize. We want a federal, national, improved Medicare for All health insurance bill.
So I just interviewed actually Ash Kara for our show tomorrow, and I was asking him what happened with the state Medicare for All bill in California. And an interesting point that he made was that there were only 2 assembly members in the state that didn't take corporate money. And I was shocked because California is what we think of as, the most progressive state in the union. And I wondered if you could speak to who your opponent is taking money from and what role you think that's playing in not having these bills pass across the country.
Well, the first thing I want to do, if anybody really wants the deep, dirty story about the incumbent I'm running against, go to my website, callforcongress.com. Look at the Rick's Receipts tab. My team has done gold standard opposition research on the incumbent. He's been the incumbent in this district for 22 years now. Takes money, bags of money from the fossil fuel industry, from the military industrial complex, from the banking industry, does things like votes for the bankruptcy bill in 2005, which was what actually first put me in opposition to him as a representative. I said, I don't like this guy. I'm going to work against this guy. But here we are in a situation where we've got people pushing us towards war in our government and in the establishment media. And we've got people, he's fourth ranking Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, and he's the chair of the aviation, actually running to be chair of transportation. Well, I want to know, how are we ever going to get a green and sustainable transportation system when you got the guy running the show who takes all the money from not only the fossil fuel industries, but all of the other industries that use the fossil fuel industry? There's no incentive when these people are piling money into his campaign coffers. There's no incentive for him to force any real change, even though it's what's needed in this country. Now, in my district, we have more coastline than almost any other district in the country. We stand to be substantially impacted by rising tides. And a report just came out that by 2050, we're almost guaranteed to see a foot rise in tide unless we do something about it right now. Well, he's completely performative on the issue of climate change, not going to do a thing about it. I don't want him to be chair of transportation. I want him out of there, and we need voices against the fossil fuel industry right now in Congress.
So, Jason, what are your biggest obstacles then to getting elected? I mean, you're dealing with an incumbent. How long has he been in office?
He's in his 11th term now. In
his 11th term. And has he been challenged before?
He has been challenged before, but I wouldn't say seriously. The people have the wrong idea about Washington State as being a progressive state. I think we're a progressive state sort of in the electorate, but our state party, and I say this having spent 4 years on the Washington State Democrat Central Committee, we are a very establishment-controlled party in Washington State. That's why 6 of the 7 Democrats that represent our 10 districts are New Democrats. And the New Democrats coalition, the only one who's not a member of the New Democrats is Pramila Jayapal. They were formed as an explicitly free trade, and it's an anti-labor caucus. Now, what I want to say before I have to go, I have a huge issue with the Progressive Caucus right now. I think the fact that there's no standards in the Progressive Caucus, that they're allowing New Democrats overlap membership, the fact that there are over a dozen members of the Progressive Caucus that get more than 50% of their money from corporate PACs, I think it's terrible. I think the Progressive Caucus needs to have some standards, and if people out there want to know what I'm going to do different, I will tell you what, I will not join the Progressive Caucus until they get those standards, because I'm not going to sit at the same table with people like Adam Smith and say that we have the same goals, because we don't.
Yeah, one thing I did really like when I was taking a look at your website is the extent to which you had some tweets up there that showed a willingness to be adversarial to people, not just within your own party, but even other progressives, so-called progressives as well. And I think a lot of folks who are watching this broadcast have an appetite for that. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jason.
Appreciate it very much. Pleasure to talk to you. And thank you to everybody else on the panel. And thank you, Marianne. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, everybody, you can see that this is hot stuff, because you could hear from everything that Jason said. He knows what he's talking about. You're going to feel that way about all these candidates. Please don't forget the donate button. Over to you, Julianna.
Actually, we're doing a little rearranging.
We're shuffling. We're doing a bit of shuffling.
Yeah. So we're going to be now joined by Mike Ortega.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And let me just tell you who Mike Ortega is while we get him ready. He is a former garment cutter and meat packer and current biomedical engineer. He's also a father and a husband, and he's running against a Blue Dog Dem in California's 46th district. Very excited to be joined by him. He's also, as you'll see, he identifies as a socialist, so we're going to talk about that. And as he's getting ready, just one other thing I want to add is that I think that I'd much rather be disappointed by more progressives in power
Yeah, exactly.
than try
Thank you.
to act within the world in which we live right now, where there aren't that many. I feel like we've skipped a step a little bit. And even, even people who, not to sound like a Leninist, but even if you have that perspective, there is something that's known as a political education. And in order to even learn that electoral politics aren't the way forward, we have to go through the step of having more progressive elected.
As
Then you
Lenin
can
himself
say
said,
that's,
or
yeah.
or from within.
Friends of mine who are very critical of electoralism right now, many of whom shows you probably watch, often note that they were radicalized through the Bernie 2016 or 2020 campaigns, and that they will acknowledge that they learned a lot about what to fight for and how to fight for it through those processes. So even though I have a lot of respect for people who say, maybe I don't want to even give money, that's a very different thing from divesting from the process and following and getting to know these candidates. So I'm glad we're all here.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And without any further ado, let us bring onto the stage, virtual stage, Matt Ortega. Thank you so much. Mike Ortega. I'm a little nervous. The order got overthrown. Freudian slip. I wish the order got overthrown, actually. Yeah. Can you tell us, you identify as a socialist. What does being a socialist mean to you? And how does that shape your politics? And is that something that resonates with your community?
Being a socialist to me means that you fight for working people, you fight for middle-class families, and you absolutely reject working for the corrupt ruling rich. And so really it's about power in the hands of people. I think that message is doing really well in our community. There's a lot of pundits, academics that try to say, hey, in a majority Latino district like yours, they're not progressive, they don't have all these high ideas, they're not woke. The reality is that those people are sitting behind their desk for too long in their offices. Working people want to hear a politician step up and actually address the struggles they're facing on a day-to-day basis. They want to hear somebody that's willing to fight for their access to healthcare, somebody that's willing to fight against the rich and powerful, because they're fed up both with Nancy Pelosi and with Mitch McConnell. And they want to know that they're going to be able to support and be a part of something different. So no, working people don't have a problem with socialism. To be honest, none of them know what it even means. But when they meet our campaigners, when they meet us, when they meet me, they're happy about the message we're bringing.
And can you tell us about your opponent, who you're running against? Sounds like a great
we're running
guy.
against, we're running against Lou Correa, who's a Blue Dog Democrat. He's member of the Homeland Security Committee. He is a big supporter of U.S. militarism abroad. He's a major friend to the big pharma industry, big oil, banking, and big tech. And he's not shy about it. So when asked on the question, he always talks about protecting the job creators. And he's turned his back on his own community several times. He even endorsed a local sheriff who promised to bring ICE into Orange County to deport people. Now, this is someone who ran on immigration reform. But the only thing he's actually really stood for and really made moves on is trying to protect the profits of Big Pharma. So we're calling him out, and we're challenging him on that record. And when people in this district hear about that record, they're ready to move on.
Great. And anything else you want to make sure people know about you and your campaign?
Absolutely. So our campaign, of course, like many of the other candidates, is not taking corporate money, right? And an important element of that is we are in one of the richest counties in America, in Orange County. But our district, 4 out of 10 high school students don't graduate high school. Over 50% of the people in this district are rent burdened. This is the working class heart of Orange County, California. And so this is a ripe district, like a 30-point blue district. This is a ripe district for us to challenge a right-wing incumbent like this. And this is part of our win strategy. And we think we'll be able to actually build some working class power here.
And can you also talk about how your parents' story inspired you? I know that they came from Ecuador and Puerto Rico, could not read and write, and worked very hard to create and support the family that they did. Can you talk about that?
I remember growing up, by the time I was maybe in the first grade, I used to have to help my mother and father occasionally read documents either from the government or the bank. I was the youngest of 8. And I remember just never being able to see my dad until nighttime for maybe an hour or two before he had to go to bed. He worked these backbreaking hours in heavy industrial work. And I saw how much they suffered in trying to at least get us through school to have a little bit better of a life than they had. And I still, I'm still in touch with them. They're still around and they're still struggling. And witnessing this is really a part of how I became a socialist, because right-wingers will tell you, well, in America, you just got to work hard. There's not a lot of people that worked harder than my father. And there's no one that's been betrayed more by American capitalism than my parents. My mother's had to ration insulin. I've had to see my dad work through severe injuries out of fear of getting laid off. And in spite of that, today, they still struggle to be able to make ends meet, afford medication, be able to make sure there's food on the table. And so out of that tragedy, it really woke me up and made me want to challenge what this system is. And to this day, I'm really inspired by the struggle and sacrifice they had, but it's also motivation for what we need to fight for.
And finally, what do you say to people who feel done with electoralism? You're someone who's obviously incredibly critical of corporate Democrat model. You are a socialist. What are your words, your response to that criticism?
Yeah, I've heard it a number of times, and I follow a lot of the left-wing pundits and other Twitter accounts. Here's my take on it. I'm an active member of the Democratic Socialists here in Orange County, California. For me, this serves as one of the most important platforms and means to energize working people to feel empowered. I think I heard Briahna mention a number of people were radicalized through the 2016 Bernie run. I mean, that was something that was powerful and it gave me a second wind of inspiration in my life. And so for us, we need to look at it as a tool and platform and not the end all be all. Because the rich and powerful in DC, they're going to come against us. And we're not going to be able to stand up against them alone. But what we have to do at the local levels with each of us that are trying to run within this district is we're using this office as a platform, as a way to amplify the message for the working people, for the progressive fighters on the ground. And if we ever think we're above that, we're lost. And
Thank you.
what I try.
Sorry. No. I was just going to thank you so much for speaking to us.
No, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. One thing I want to say before we move to the next person, this issue of the job creators, that's been part of the trickle-down economics propaganda for 40 years. The income inequality that has been created in such a large part by a change in the tax code, the stockholder capitalist model, that if you just give money to the job creators, give money to the people on top, and then all those jobs will trickle down, the money will trickle down and lift all boats. Yeah. Well, obviously, it hasn't. It has left millions and millions of people without even a life vest. But this issue of the job creators, it's important that everybody understands. If you look at the jobs created by corporate America, and then you look at the jobs created by small businesses, the number of jobs created by small businesses is just under the number of jobs created by corporate America. So that's one of the pieces of real total bullshit propaganda that none of us should buy into.
Yeah, and I would really like to see the workers on those jobs start becoming the members of our government, because they have that inside track. They understand what people are going to. I'm sick of having people who don't understand what their constituents are going through, or even what their lives are like in the least, trying to pretend there's some compassion there and, just taking corporate money and selling out. And that guy, it's like, I want to get up and go vote for that guy now.
Mike is great. Everyone check out Mike Ortega.
Yeah. Okay.
Who was it that just woefully underestimated the price of the average house in New York City? Was it Eric Adams?
Yeah.
Who was like,
he doesn't even live there.
Well, he spends so much on his vegan diet that it throws everything off.
Fair enough.
So,
okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that was great. Thank you, Mike.
Joining us next is Rebecca Parsons from Washington's 6th District. Rebecca, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, Rebecca serves as a commissioner on the Tacoma Area Commission on Disabilities, and I just want to get right through. I think one of the things that shows who you are is what you did with the garbage collection around the homeless encampment. You didn't wait until elected officials went and did something. You just got the job done. Can you talk about what was going on and what you did there?
Yeah, so last winter, a group that I helped start called Tacoma Housing Now, we did a lot of direct actions. We went into an empty middle school, into an empty hotel, just to get people from homeless camps that we work with more housing. But one of the common complaints as well of people who are homeless, especially in camps, is that the city refuses to provide trash service to them. And so what we did was we took a cue from the Young Lords who did this back in the 70s. We went to the camps with two U-Hauls, two rental trucks that we had rented. We picked up over 100 bags of trash, mountains and mountains of trash, piled them into the U-Hauls, and then drove to City Hall and dumped it in front of City Hall. And then what do you know, a couple hours later, the city managed to take the trash away. And so it just shows that what is possible when you actually challenge the ruling elite, especially through direct action. And that's what I'm interested in combining. I've been hearing the discussion even on this call and many other calls as well about is electoral politics worth it anymore? And no, it's not the way that we've been doing it where it's solely electoral, but direct action does get the goods. I have seen that personally. And if we can combine a seat in Congress with direct action nationwide, I think we can achieve some real results.
What kind of pressures do you anticipate coming at you, or what has already come at you from the forces that would keep you or people like you out of office?
Well, my opponent and his supporters have spread smears about me, made up things. The state party has blocked me from using certain tools that I need to run. And it's also, there's been a media blackout locally during the last campaign. Not a single newspaper wrote about me. One did at the very, very end, but I was running for over a year. They wrote an article about a man who was thinking about challenging my opponent, and then they wrote an article about how he was no longer thinking about challenging the opponent. But they never wrote about me, the woman who was actually challenging the opponent. And I was actually, when I started, the first woman to ever run for the seat. And we never have had a woman represent the seat. And so that, people talked about the Bernie blackout. Well, we see that locally as well. Media is very skewed towards incumbents and corporate interests.
Talk about how you're getting the word out. How are you
getting
doing
the word out? Yeah, well, like last time we made over 900,000 calls, close to 1 million. We'll definitely keep doing that. And then as the pandemic, hopefully, fingers crossed, things continue to open up and it's safe to do so, we'll be doing a lot of canvassing and reaching out to voters one-on-one. Last time we would speak with people on the phones who said, you're the first political campaign that has ever reached out to me. We got a lot of support from seniors across the district. So this idea that, progressives can only get elected with young people. Yes, young people are important, and renters. That's who we're reaching out to, but also seniors who are trying to scrape by, rationing their medicine so that they can afford their rent, or cutting back on food so that they can afford their insulin, that kind of thing. So it's really a multi-generational, multiracial coalition across the district.
It's absolutely sickening that is even happening. Will you have an opportunity to debate your opponent, and when is the primary?
The primary is in August. It's a top two or jungle primary where everybody runs against everybody else. Same system as in California. And I'm not sure if I'll have the opportunity because last time my opponent refused to debate me and didn't even acknowledge the campaign publicly. And so we'll see what happens this time. But we are able to get the word out there and let people know that, hey, this guy, he has been in office for almost 10 years, and he's a Democrat, but GovTrack ranks him the 15th most conservative Democrat in the House. He joined with Republicans to sign a letter calling for Social Security cuts. He opposes Medicare for all and the Green New Deal. And in a district that's been blue for over half a century, there's really no reason for us to be represented by somebody so conservative, especially in a progressive district like this that went for Bernie in 2016, and Bernie came in a very close second to Biden in 2020. So this district is really ready for something new.
Well, we are happy to support you here, and I hope everyone watching will go to our site and support you. Go to your site, go to the site that's collecting here. I want to get on to a couple more questions that I have for you. You worked as a substitute teacher, and you have talked a lot on your campaign trail about just how much a person's zip code determines the quality of their education, and just how hard teachers work for so little pay. Would you like to make a comment on the state of what's happening both in your district and across the country at this time?
Yeah, education is a huge issue. Washington State actually has the most regressive tax system in the entire country because we don't have an income tax. And so how does the government, the state government, local government make up that shortfall? They institute taxes on consumption. And so that hits poor people and working class, middle class people much more than it hits people like some of the richest men in the world, like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, who live in our state. And so where you live really determines the quality of the education you get. And teachers do their best, but I saw as a substitute teacher just how stretched thin teachers are, how few resources they get. And many teachers have to have second jobs. We're heavily unionized, one of the most unionized states in the country, very strong teachers unions here. So teachers are better off here than maybe in some other parts of the country, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And in other parts of the country, teachers having to work second, third jobs just to get by. And then meanwhile, students receiving very different levels of education based on the income level of the zip code that they live in.
I'm switching to another topic. This is just a straight up, we have like a minute left, so I want to make sure to get your answer on this. Would you join the Progressive Caucus, even though they're not necessarily progressive in some areas of the environment, foreign policy, et cetera? And if not, what would you do instead?
I would be really interested in joining something like what Jason Call has talked about starting. It may be smaller, it probably will be smaller, but a small group of really principled members of Congress who will fight for things like Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, and housing policies that I'm really excited about, but that nobody that we just don't talk about. For example, rent control is possible nationwide, and we have had it in this country before, and we could have it again. And so I would really be interested in putting energy into and joining that kind of a small caucus with other candidates like Jason Call or Stephanie Gallardo, another progressive running here in Washington State, so that we can force the issue.
Thank you, Rebecca. Rebecca Parsons from Washington 6th District. I wish you the best of luck, and I suggest everyone watching right now go and support Rebecca and the other candidates. The more I talk to the candidates, the more I want the whole slate. I want the whole slate.
I do too, and I hope once again that you'll go to that donate button and see all of the slates, and you can hear from the candidates already why we want these people to be in Congress and why we want a wider, more expanded set of problem-solving modalities to be presented in our Congress. Okay, I think
and that's Seize the House, right? SeizeTheHouse.com is where we're
SeizeTheHouse.com. SeizeTheHouse.com. I think you're going back to Amani.
It's going back to me, yes. Amani, I'm so happy that she's here. Amani Oakley from New Jersey's, running for New Jersey's 10th District. She attended. Hi, Amani, hi. I was just about to give you a whole background, but hi, it's so nice to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Let me move back a little bit. I'm a little close. There we go.
No, you're good. You, as the legislative director for the New Jersey Working Families Alliance, you fought against the establishment's suffocating corruption. I love that term. And the unrelenting grasp on New Jersey's grossly immoral party boss system. Talk about that system.
Yeah, absolutely. So New Jersey has an extreme machine Tammany Hall style of politics, meaning we have these party bosses who are placed in a few places in the state, and they choose in their area who is going to be elected. We have this thing called the ballot line, which New Jersey is literally the only state in the nation to have this. We have the most corrupt ballot design in the nation. And what happens is the party bosses put elected officials or potential elected officials and candidates in one long column. And they put them under a really popular name. So they'll be under like a Cory Booker or a Joe Biden. And what this does is it tricks voters to just go straight to that column and vote straight down because all they see are Democrats. Whereas a regular ballot will have the name of the position and then everybody who is running for that position under it, whether they're on the same team or not, whether they're chosen by a party boss or not. And studies have shown that this gives folks who are backed by the machine with way less name ID a huge boost when it comes to election time. So essentially, our party bosses here in New Jersey are choosing the elected officials, not the everyday people. And I'm challenging that system. I am running off the line. I am challenging the party bosses. I am challenging the ballot line system. It is corrupt, and it is absolutely something that we will not stand for here in New Jersey any longer.
Oh, that is awesome. And my question to you about that is, have you had any pushback on that yet from those bosses?
Oh, of course, definitely. I mean, it's really, really nasty, especially what happens to women of color when they do these challenging type of races. I mean, I have been called really nasty names, like vagabond, which essentially means like homeless and dirty. I've been called, unqualified, which is amazing because my opponent literally inherited his seat and hasn't worked for anything his entire life, was born the son of a congressman. And I've had to work for literally everything I've ever achieved. I'm an attorney. I've worked in the United States Senate. I've worked in the New Jersey legislature. I've worked in grassroots spaces. So it's really amazing the types of nasty names they call you, and the types of things they try to do. But again, I've been in this space a long time. It's nothing that I wasn't prepared for or nothing that I don't expect. And frankly, it's not something that the voters are going to fall for. I've been having a lot of conversations with voters lately, and they are ready for change. They are equally as fed up with the party boss system in New Jersey as I am. So I'm very, very confident that none of their typical tricks are going to work this time around.
I enjoyed learning about the fact that the incumbent just basically is the son with the same name as the guy who was in for a while, and he's not doing anything useful. In fact, he takes tons of money from big polluters. Is that accurate?
Very accurate. He's taken money from ExxonMobil. He has taken money from several oil pipeline PACs. And it's not just mega polluters, but it's also other bad actors. He's taken money from Raytheon, which is a weapons manufacturer. He's taken money from the same realtors PAC that tried to stop Elizabeth Warren and Cori Bush's eviction moratorium during a pandemic. He's taken money from Wells Fargo, so people who have been doing predatory lending for God knows how long. I mean, this guy really has no scruples when it comes to who he will accept money from and who he will allow to control him in Congress.
Are you seeing evidence that the people in your district are waking up to the big difference between you, a candidate who is not taking corporate donations, and your corporate Democrat that you're hoping to replace?
Oh, yeah, definitely. People really like the fact and are really, moving towards the fact that I'm not taking any money from corporate PACs. In fact, all of my donations so far have come from individuals, no PACs at all, not even the progressive ones. And our average donation is actually around $33. So, we are really, really a grassroots campaign. But even with that, I was able to outraise my opponent 2-1, my first ever fundraising quarter as a candidate. And our second quarter, we still raised over six figures. So we're doing excellent, and people are really, really gravitating towards us because really people are fed up in New Jersey. People are ready for change. They're tired of the same old party boss system, the same old good old boys club. They are sick of that, and they want somebody who will actually work for them and work for the district.
Amani, talk about the environmental challenges that New Jersey itself is facing and how important it is to treat it as the emergency that it is, the climate emergency.
Yeah, for sure. So we actually have some of the highest rates of childhood asthma in the nation due to high levels of smog. Where I am in New Jersey, we're very, very close to the city, actually. And so, people tend to drive as opposed to taking public transportation because our public transit is not efficient and it is not green. So people tend to drive. And what that does is it gets pollutants stuck in the air, especially in the summer and in the hot months. Pollution gets extra caught in the air, and that tends to attribute to high levels of childhood asthma in the area. We also have an issue with lead in our pipes. Recently, after all the hoopla and political blowback that Newark received, they finally were able to replace a lot of pipes. But it's a problem all over the district and, frankly, all over North Jersey because we are an old industrial area. We also have an issue with lead in the paint of old homes and apartment buildings, as well as in the soil, which is one that really doesn't get talked about that much. And then finally, this past hurricane, Hurricane Ida, it really, really hit this area very, very hard. There was flooding like I've never seen before. I've lived in this area my entire life. And for the first time ever, I'm 31, for the first time ever, my basement flooded because of how much rain and downpour there was. And frankly, our infrastructure is not green and ready for that type of downpour. It's not ready for that type of climate change. So we need to be investing in candidates that are going to be fighting for a Green New Deal and fighting to make sure that we can give good federal jobs guarantees, good union paying jobs to those who will go and fix our infrastructure and make it green, especially in this area where it's such a critical need.
This is a final question I have for you. So biotech and big pharma are New Jersey's main industries. And is there an appetite for folks in New Jersey to go against those main bread and butter industries in the state and really do the kind of thing that you'd like to do, which is support a Medicare for All program?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. Because, frankly, people cannot afford their health care. It is entirely too expensive. And you know what? I often think about in a post-COVID world where we're dealing with things like long COVID, where we're dealing with things like people getting COVID and having to go to the doctor and get those checkups. People are really starting to realize in this area, like, hey, listen, we need single payer. We need Medicare for all, because there is no way that when we're dealing with these long-term effects of a pandemic, that we are really going to be able to afford our health care moving forward and to make sure that we are healthy moving forward. So even though those are huge industries, everyday voters are tired of the games that pharmaceutical companies are playing, and they want to see Medicare for all and single pay.
Imani Oakley running for New Jersey's 10th District. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for doing this work. We know it's not easy to run an unbossed campaign and an unbought campaign given what is going on in our government. And we look forward to hearing more from you and supporting you the best way we can.
Thank you so much for having me.
Every time I talk to another candidate.
I know, they're so great.
I know.
They're great.
I know. If you think about what this country would be like if we had more people in Congress who were like the candidates that we have here tonight. And remember, the candidates on our list at seizethehouse.com are not the entirety of all the incredible progressives who are running around the country, but they need our support. Imani was just talking. Others have talked about how their opponents have gotten money from banks, insurance companies, defense contractors. How surprised can we be? If somebody's gotten huge donations from a defense contractor, then of course they're going to be more likely to vote for these huge, obscenely gargantuan defense budgets. But the people that you're hearing tonight are people who would change these things. They would bring the priorities that actually represent the will of the American people in poll after poll. So once again, please don't forget the donate button. Let's do what we can to help them get there.
Another reason it's important to elect progressives is because it changes the notion of what's politically viable and popular, right? We know we've been bamboozled by political and media elites into thinking certain policies are fringe. We know that's not true. And then seeing this reflected in politicians, people become aware of the fact that it's not just a fringe thing for politicians either. So that's another reason. And speaking of which, I got to bring in this next guest because he's one of those people who's going to make a big difference. And he's one of my guys because we're all assigned different people. We're so excited. Sergio Alcubillo is a husband, father, immigrant poverty law attorney, and he's running for Hawaii's 1st District. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Katie. Aloha.
Aloha. A lot of people think of Hawaii as this kind of paradise, as a vacation destination. What are the struggles that working people in your district are facing, the challenges and struggles that they're facing, that you would be remedying and fighting for?
A great question, Katie. I mean, from the outside looking in, people think we're living in paradise, right? Every day is a vacation. But in reality, we live in the most expensive state in the country and with one of the lowest minimum wage ever. So, a lot of people are working 2 or 3 jobs. Even myself, even though I'm an attorney, I was working a second job in the evening just to make ends meet. I was working in a women's shoe department store, selling women's shoes. But that's the reality for so many people here in Hawaii. And for all the viewers that are listening, I want you to remember that next time you come to Hawaii, if someone's working at the hotel or someone's working in the tourism industry, just remember this is probably their second or third job for the day.
And speaking of working hard, could you tell us about your opponent who, if he's working hard, he seems to be working hard to make the lives of people more miserable, not better. Can you tell us about your opponent who's a big Blue Dog Democrat?
Yeah, so our current incumbent for this district, he's the co-chair of the Blue Dog Caucus. So I put a lot of blame on him with Build Back Better not being able to pass, because he was the one that was pushing for decoupling it from the infrastructure bill. He's born into wealth, born into privilege, completely the opposite of who I am and what I stand for. Even though we're both attorneys, we just completely fight for different, for different things. But yeah, Representative Ed Case, people know that people are starting to find out that he is not fighting for their best interest, and it's time for change.
And what are the other unique challenges that you'd be focusing on representing the First District of Hawaii, specifically, for instance, how the pandemic has affected your district?
Yeah, and this is what really brought me into politics to begin with the pandemic, because so much of our industry is focused on tourism. So when the pandemic hit, at the height of the pandemic, there were so many people that were unemployed, and they were waiting for their unemployment insurance benefits. So I helped organize a rally at our state capitol on behalf of these unemployed workers, fighting for their unemployment insurance. And of course, our state capitol was closed, but if you were a lobbyist, or if you were someone with power and influence, or if you were someone with money, of course you could go up there and speak with your legislators. And for me, that was just disgusting. And it infuriated me, and it just made me want to really put my name out there, and I'm going to continue that fight.
And how has your biography, your experiences, how have they influenced your worldview and your campaign? I know that you lost your father from a young age. Your mother had an extremely hard experience also coming over from the Philippines. Can you talk about how that shaped your campaign?
As an immigrant from the Philippines, I came to this country at 7 years old after my father was gunned down by a communist hit squad. My mom was 7 months pregnant with my youngest brother at the time. So she brought me here to the United States, left the rest of my siblings behind until she was able to save enough money to bring the rest of my siblings behind. But as a single mother raising 6 kids here in this country, I mean, I know how much work and effort she's put into trying to live the American dream, and it's been a struggle. And for me, that's to be able to give back and make life better for other people. I know from firsthand experience really what the people are struggling with, and that's something that our incumbent just cannot grasp. Working families, being able to afford childcare for their children, being able to afford preschool, being able to afford just to be able to simply live here in this country. But, and that's what I'm going to continue to fight for. And that's really at the heart of my campaign. It's just that experience growing up as an immigrant, growing up in a single parent home, and just seeing my mom work hard day in and day out. I want to pay it forward, and I'm going to stay true to those principles.
And so what are some of the things that you would work on first if elected?
Well, one of the first things I would do, of course, is make sure that my staff, they have a living wage. So many people in D.C. are just barely getting by. But I want to set the example when I say that, I want to give a voice for the people. I'm going to not just say it, but actually do it. And that's going to start with making sure that, that my staff have a living wage. And second, I'm going to pick up the pieces of Build Back Better. With that thing just failing right now, there's so many things that can help people here in Hawaii. Making sure that people can afford childcare, making sure that people can afford insurance, making sure that young families can continue to live here in Hawaii with so many people here just giving up and throwing in the towel and moving to the continent. I have just so many friends here that they just cannot afford to live here, where the median price of a home is $1 million. $1 million. And for me, I'm renting a small house, and our home is $1 million. I would have never imagined I would be living in $1 million home.
Wow. And anything else you want to make sure people know about you, your campaign, what you're fighting for?
This campaign is people-powered and people-centered. We've made the pledge not to accept corporate PAC money. My donations, 70% of my donations in this last report came from people here in Hawaii, whereas the incumbent, less than 2% of his donors come from within the state. It just really amplifies who I'm fighting for, what I stand for, and really what this campaign is all about. Our politics doesn't have to belong to the rich, to the powerful. It belongs to people like you and me, everyday working people like you and me. And that's who we need: more people in Congress, not more millionaires in Congress. We need everyday working people in Congress making decisions that are going to impact their lives.
Well, thank you so much. All really appreciate your time and your thoughtful answers, and best of luck, Sergio.
So much, Katie. Thank you.
Thank
Aloha.
you. Aloha.
Have all of you been to Hawaii?
When I was a kid.
Or a friend's wedding.
Going to Hawaii is a real eye-opener. I remember when I used to go there and, like Sergio was saying, everything's so wonderful, everything's so beautiful. And then when I went there probably around 20 years ago and I started being educated, being there, it's really ground zero. For the corporatist takeover, particularly of indigenous peoples, Queen Lily Kulani and her experience of the pineapple companies. And I heard one man, I was visiting somebody's home, a beautiful home in Maui, and somebody who worked there said to me, I said, it's so beautiful here. And this woman said, yes, it's like being Hawaiian is like waking up every morning and you're surrounded by these She said every day is like waking up on Christmas morning, so many presents and none of them belong to you. And that's when I started learning more. And of course, when you learn about the history of what happened in Hawaii, you see that the tentacles of that kind of corporate takeover is happening all over. I thought it was so moving hearing Sergio talk about his immigrant parents, hearing Mike Ortega talk about his immigrant parents, the immigrant experience, this horrifying way that we have so many people in this country talking about how the immigrants are so lucky to be here. The truth of the matter is, and unless you're African American and you were descended from slaves, all of our ancestors came over here seeking a better life. And the historical thread in this country is not that this country is just so good to the immigrants, but that the immigrants continue to feed the moral values and the psychic lifeblood of this country. So we need them in there. It's not just that they deserve to be there. This country needs them in there. So this is very exciting for all of us. And I hope that you are feeling the same kind of inspiration that we are, right? Am I right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm reading some of the comments and reflecting a little bit on, I heard you make some interesting critiques the other day on status quo, Marianne. And I think a lot of us are reflecting on what happened. Because there are obviously people who are immigrants in Congress, there are these progressives in Congress. How do we start to assess? I think this is a question a lot of people are thinking about, so we should deal with it head on. How do you start to assess what happens or what has happened between the campaign, rhetoric of some of the people that have come to disappoint us over time and now that they're in Congress? And what can we extract from the people we're talking to today that helps us to feel confident that they're going to stick these kinds of landings? And so I'm really appreciating learning about some of these people's backgrounds and asking them exactly what they make of the state of the Democratic Party right now.
All right, yeah.
Why is it any different than falling in love? You never know. In life, there's always risk. You never know. Everybody's talking to how do we know there'll be...
like Whitney Houston says, how will I know?
In life, you never know what any job's going to be. You don't know what any candidate's going to be. And even the candidates who don't disappoint you aren't going to agree with you about everything.
How possible is it to actually be an elected official in the party system that we have and stay clean? Is that possible? Have we ever seen it happen?
If we want to extend the dating metaphor, this is kind of like
within the parties.
We're creating a certain criteria, like we're searching for certain criteria.
Yes, and also I don't think anyone would here would say that there isn't such thing as a red flag.
Right. Yeah.
And I think on some level we're plumbing for red flags.
We're plumbing for red flags. Exactly. Yeah. Right. We're trying to find the most, qualified candidates to see if we should
find the qualified candidates and hope. Speaking of qualified candidates, speaking of someone who we absolutely know will not disappoint us when she goes to Congress, is a friend. Not only she would have been one of the panelists tonight. You're probably guessing who that is. She would have been one of the panelists tonight. However, she decided to run. Come on. I'm sure you're guessing who it is. She made history in 2005 as the first African-American woman to represent Ward 1 of the Cleveland City Council. Again, in 2008 as the first African-American woman to serve as state senator in Ohio's 25th district. You can see her beautiful face there. You know she was the national surrogate for Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign, national co-chair for Bernie 2020, and as we know, not only a good friend to all of us here, but a good friend to everybody watching. Hi, Nina.
Hi, Marianne. It's a pleasure to be with the ladies.
It's so great to see you. And you're out there and you're doing it again. First of all, I want to take a moment. As I've said about all of these people, one of the reasons I feel so strongly about this night is because I know how hard it is to run. You have really taken it. I tell you, one powerful woman. And people see your power, and some people just applaud you up the sky, and other people, because of your power, want to do what they can to stop it. This is the story of the woman in America, a story of a black woman in America. Tell us how it's going. Tell us what you want to do in Congress, and tell us how we can help you.
Well, thank you, Marianne, and to all of the wonderful hosts of Seize the House. I just appreciate the vision that you all had to put something together like this and to invite me into this particular moment. For me, I'm a missionary. I'm on a mission. This mission has to do with humanity, and that's why I call myself a hell-raising humanitarian. I want to push the body politic in this country to bend towards the will of the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class for a moment. Can we just center the people who need it the most for the moment and not put people without the power? They're always in the country, and other things fell apart. Do you believe that we can have more progressive? And I
Is
get
it
the
just me,
frustration.
or-
Marianne, I think.
Oh, so sorry, Nina, honey. Okay, they're going to work. I know every. Oh,
We're gonna
we are
reconnect.
reconnecting
Yeah,
right now,
yeah,
so I know all of you want very much
Everyone,
to
I
hear what
know,
Nina
it's
Turner has
it's
to say.
torture to start hearing Nina's words of wisdom and inspiration, and then but luckily there's a lot more where that came from.
We could
so.
continue the metaphor. It was
dating metaphor.
Nina
Yeah, let's talk
interrupted
about
us.
dating. All right,
what we all
yeah.
want. We're
Nina,
like,
right? She's the belle of the ball.
What happened? Where'd you go?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nina really is the big woman on campus. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're told she's coming, but somebody, we can, any of us could
That's why you got to have a lot of fires
sing her
in the
praises
iron.
until
What's
she
the
comes
expression?
back.
Iron
Okay,
fire.
we got her.
She's come-
Okay.
We don't have her yet.
She's
Oh, we
on
don't
her
have her
way.
yet.
She's
You
on
see?
her way back.
This is how they get you. They keep you on your toes, right? You have to play rough. Play hard to get, and that's what we're so enthralled.
Well, we did just do a dating episode of the podcast, but let's not do a part 2 just yet. I will say that, I felt very, very lucky to be able to cover some of Senator Turner's race this August in Cleveland. My family's from Cleveland. My mom's about to move back home in a month or so. And I'm really excited to see how it goes down this time because there's been some redistricting that's favorable to Senator Turner. I think that there were some, scheduling changes that happened very last minute that got them a little behind the ball in the advertising game. And I think this time around, there's a lot more that they can anticipate. And I think folks who might be feeling a little like, oh, didn't we just have this bite at the apple, should feel heartened by the fact that there are real circumstantial differences here that make this race a very different one. And I'm sure Senator Turner will tell us more about that.
Unfortunately, the connection with Nina has been lost for a few minutes,
lost
I
connection.
guess. So
No,
we
but
won't
we're
be
gonna
able to
get
hear
her
her
back.
now. But just in case, I know she had another fundraiser she had to go to in California. Just in case we can't get her back tonight, obviously still do what you can to help this woman get into Congress.
Hello,
Boy, we need
someone.
her. Boy, we need her. Go to the donate button. Go to Nina Turner. Go to her site. Do what you can. I'm going to throw it back over to Julianna right now because the next candidate is great also. Connecticut, right?
Yes, I lobbied to be the one who got to interview
The
because
corporate lobbyist.
I'm a corporate lobbyist. I'm a
Non-corporate
candidate lobbyist because if elected, this next candidate would be my representative. I'm in the district. Muad Hraizi, first-generation American, one of 6 children, was born to Libyan parents who came to America as asylum seekers and settled in my home state of Connecticut. Welcome to the program. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be joining these awesome cast of hosts. So, yeah, thank you.
As I was getting to know you by doing my research, I'm like, I got to sign up to help the campaign. I'm just down the road, so you'll be seeing more of this face when I get home. So many questions for you. First, can you talk about, you have so many different experiences that you're bringing to this race. You are a Muslim American. You are a descendant of Libyan parents, first generation in the country. And you also had a health scare at age 17 where you almost died because the hospital would not treat your emergency once they saw that your family had some medical debt. In fact, you were like dropping dead in the hospital, and they said, can you pay 20 grand? And you're like, I'm dying, Can you talk about how that experience, and I don't mean to make light of it because it's horrendous, and I know our viewers have gone through those things themselves, but can you talk about how that polarized you and what you intend to do so that doesn't happen to other people both in your district and across our country?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I always say that I've experienced both some of the beauty of our country and kind of the nightmare of our country as well. So my parents came here fleeing persecution and were able to seek asylum and have liberties that we all experience that I think many take for granted, but that I've always understood to be kind of not rights, but things we fought for. But also I've seen the downside of our country, which is medical debt, foreclosure, and just at 17, being denied and delayed healthcare while I was literally convulsing and nearly being killed by our healthcare system because I was too poor to afford it. And so I kind of bring this culmination of experiences to the campaign and to the constituents I speak with. And I think that it provides kind of it encapsulates a lot of the challenges that America faces. So it's been really incredible to kind of share the story and see how people respond.
Talk about what's happening in our country right now in terms of asylum seekers and their plight.
Yeah, so I actually worked in Congress. I worked for Senator Chris Murphy, and one of the issue areas I handled was immigration. So got to see our asylum and immigration process up close and up front. And it is one of the darkest areas that is often misunderstood or just not even covered. Seeing how people are ripped away from their family members, seeing how people who are literally running for their lives, fleeing usually from south of the border, coming here and then being thrown into prison, even when it's internationally recognized right to seek asylum. It's just an abomination of everything that our country has pledged to stand for.
Representative Larson is the person you're seeking to unseat. I mean, has anyone at this table, do they know anything that he's done? Has he done anything useful? I mean, he has kind of name recognition because he's just been there under the D for all this time, but he has done very little as far as I can see, and yet he gets a lot of corporate money coming in from not just the state of Connecticut, but all throughout the country. Talk a little bit about the difference that you would bring to that seat.
Yeah. And just to set the context, so Connecticut is nicknamed the land of steady habits. I recently discovered that this would be the first successful primary challenge in our state's history. And kind of Representative Larson is emblematic of that steadiness. So he's been in office for 23 years since 1999, 4 years after I was born. And like you said, most people don't know what he's done. He has continued to call himself the champion of Social Security. But he's the first one who'll tell you that Social Security hasn't changed in 4 decades. And so I think a lot of people are just ready to inject new blood into Congress and remove this corporate stranglehold that has been kind of cast on our government. And so some of the things that we want to talk about is Medicare for all. And we're doing it in the insurance capital of the world, Hartford, Connecticut. And we're still winning voters because they understand that it is a disgrace when people are dying in our country, the world's wealthiest country, because they can't afford insulin. We're talking about things like signing on to the Green New Deal is good, but we need to actually talk about a plan of how do we accomplish curtailing and combating the climate crisis. So we have a real, in my opinion, people-powered agenda, and it's not just shallow and kind of talking points. We talk about how we plan on achieving a bold and systemic change.
Talk a little bit about how you feel about the Democratic Party right now, running as I guess, what's the word? Uber progressive, and they're not as welcoming as we would like them to be. Talk about that.
Yeah, well, I find that there's two different levels. There's the party in the sense of the establishment and the leaders, and there's the constituents that I speak with on doors. The party might not be very welcoming, but the people are just incredibly receptive. I don't want to, give you too much or leak some of the results we're seeing, but it is overwhelming support from constituents on doors. They are just ready for new change. They're ready for a people-powered agenda. It makes a lot of sense. They understand that if there's no corporate money in our government, that we'd be able to get things done. And so while the party, can kind of antagonize anyone who challenges them, we've had every single member of our delegation come out and endorse the 23-year incumbent against a 27-year-old. So we know that they're not going to be, very welcoming of this idea. And like I said, there's never been a successful primary. So we're sending a message, which is not only to people in our district, it's to the entire state. Enough is enough. And we believe that representation should matter. It shouldn't just be a re-election every 2 or 6 years and nothing gets done.
Do your door knockers go above to the north of Farmington Avenue. I mean, it's Farmington Avenue, right in the middle.
Yeah.
That kind of cuts the rich from the others, right in the heart of. It's very stark, right in the heart of this city. How has your reception been north of the wall?
Yeah, we've not really even delved into the area north of the wall, but I used to actually live right off of Farmington Ave. So I would kind of traverse that divide. And for folks who've never been there, it's literally you go from an area of one of the poorest kind of neighborhoods in Connecticut, and then you walk probably 5 minutes away and you're in multi-million-dollar houses, executives of insurance companies and defense contractors. So it's extremely stark, and it's not. The problem isn't that people shouldn't live side by side, rich and poor. The problem is that the rich have their enclaves and neglect the needs of the people who live just a couple blocks away. But we know who our base of support is. There might be some folks north of Farmington Ave, but we are going to start off with the people who are probably closest to the pain and are most deeply desiring change.
You're in my final question. Anything you would like people who are just new to Muad Hrazy, what would you like them to know? What are you standing for?
Yeah, I believe in a politics of possibilities. I believe in a government by and for the people, and I believe in the power of the people. And so this campaign is about providing a vision. It's just not only about calling out the weaknesses of the incumbent. We want to say that we deserve a government that is fighting for our values and reflecting our interests. And as somebody who's come from a country where we've seen the transition and the backsliding of democracy to authoritarianism, what I fear most is that the entire reason my parents came to this country will become moot if we continue to have a government that is not responding to the people's needs. And that is, I think we might eventually lose our democracy and just become an oligarchy that is dominated by the ultra wealthy. And so I'm running for the very reason my parents came to this country, which is for our democracy, for our liberties, and to be able to prosper and have a better life.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for that. I think everyone at this table shares those same concerns, and that is why we put this together tonight. Thank you, and I look forward to meeting you in person in the nutmeg state of never-changing values, or whatever you call it. Never-changing habits. That's Muad Hrazy from Connecticut's First. I encourage everyone to go check more of him out. I mean, what's there to say?
They're all fantastic. And Muad said that he believes in a politics of possibility, and a possibility became a reality right here, which is that Nina Turner is reconnected on a better Wi-Fi. So I'm told that we have Nina with us. Nina, are you here? Hi, how are you?
Good. Yes, the possibilities of finding better Wi-Fi.
So, Nina, tell us, when you're in Congress, what are things going to look like?
Ooh.
What are you going to do?
Well, I'm definitely going to take this hell-raising humanitarian spirit there with me. And certainly I understand in serving in a body. I mean, I served in the Cleveland City Council. I served in the Ohio Senate. When you serve in a body, you're serving with other folks. But there is a spirit, an attitude that must percolate through the halls of Congress that does declare that we must push policy, that the policies of this nation must bend towards the will of the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class. So I'm going to stand up for those people who are the disfranchised, the dispossessed, the forgotten, with a fervor. It's going to be as if somebody's in the middle of the ocean saying, hey, come save me. And the question becomes that if you are in the middle of that ocean and you're about to drown, who do you want to come to save you? The people that clutch the pearls and tighten their tie? Or do you want the type of people to come out there to save you who are going to radically come out there to save you? I believe that if somebody's life was on the line, they want the person who's going to radically and not ask for permission come out there to save them. So, baby, I'm bringing the heat.
You know, without saying any names, you told me that one sitting congressperson said, please run, Nina, we need you here. What's going to be the strategy next time? Let's say you get there. What's going to be the strategy next time? How are these obstructions, how are these roadblocks to genuine progressive change going to be dealt with? How are you going to do what some people have tried to do and haven't been able to?
Well, we got it. We just need a few people. We don't need them all. We need people who have the courage of their convictions and have a backbone and a spine and are willing to take risks. Not on every single. It has to be strategic, Marianne, and we know that. We get it. But there's certain things we're fighting for, certain things we're putting up that fight and drawing the ire of the more corporatist wing of the Democratic Party and the corporatists on the Republican side. I mean, we just know Republicans have lost their ever-loving mind. And then we got corporatists on the Democratic side that are holding on to things that are not helpful. So just being in coalition with people who are willing to take those kinds of risks. Not one person can do it all, but I think a few good people willing to make a stand can absolutely change things. And I will not, I'm not going to capitulate on the things that I believe in the most. So I'm bringing that fire with me, as I've brought all over every time I've served in an elected office. And I know what it's like to be in a minority. I was in a super minority when I was a state senator. But one thing my Republican colleagues did not ever want, they didn't want Sister Turner taken to the floor. They did not want that. And there were times where they didn't need me to pass anything, but they would come by and see me on certain issues because they didn't want me to use the power of the bully pulpit. That is what I am going to do. And take it on the road if necessary. Because I believe that more people put a little extra on their ordinary, extraordinary things can happen. We do not have to accept things as they are. We can see a world as it should be and fight for that world. And we got to have leaders who are willing to put something on the line. And that is why I'm doing it.
What are your legislative priorities? You get there, it's your first day. What are you going to work on first?
Oh, Lord, Marianne, it's all the things, but I would just say Medicare for all, without a doubt. I'm very disappointed about what happened in the great state of California, but that's another interview for another time. We need one of these states to come through to show this nation that it can and it should be done. All of the issues that have to do with decency, raising the minimum wage. Why don't we have the PRO Act passed? What's up with that? Why don't we have paid family medical leave? What's up with that? Mr. President, sign the executive order and cancel student debt. What is up with that? Those are the things that need to happen in this country right now so that the people who need the help the most, that they get it. So, Marianne, that one, you asked me a loaded question. What's the one thing? I want to come in there and do all the things. And it's not enough just to have somebody who's going to vote the right way or they sign on to something. What are they willing to put on the line for it? That is the difference between me and the person who currently holds the seat in the 11th division.
Speaking of the person who currently holds the seat, you went through a very tough special election already. I know, all of us watched it. You were treated terribly. It was really, really dirty politics. You had a deep decision to make that I know wasn't easy. Would you get back up, get back in there? Can you tell us a little something about what went on inside you that you said, yeah, I'm going back out there. I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to win this time?
Well, Marianne, I have to say to people who are listening and watching, you all bring people like me before the people to say that you were with me in those moments of trepidation that I had about whether or not to get back in the fight in this way. Because I'm never leaving the fight. And it was gut-wrenching. I definitely went through a lot of agony and pain, as you know, as you were helping to counsel me through this. But when I think about, not only what the last brother talked about, the possibilities, I realized that on the Underground Railroad, my city was the station of hope. And hope is an action word. And as I look back over my life and the lives of other people that I stand up for and stand beside, because it's not just about having a fighter, somebody that's going to fight for. You need somebody that is going to fight with. And I firmly recognize that when I thought about my son and my grandchildren, and also my dad, who is in his 70s, it just reminded me of how important this mission that I am on is, and that I should take the risk, take the chance to do this one more time. And then lastly, to that point, all of the outpouring of support that I have received from people, not only people who live in the 11th district. I mean, there was a time, sisters, where right after that race, I would go to the grocery store and somebody would say, I hope you run again, or I voted for you. Just taking all of those voices with me on top of making this decision helped to push me from concentrating on the pain that I was feeling, because I was maligned something terribly. I mean, it's one thing to be, fighting against somebody to win the seat. It's another thing to go through the hell that I went through during that race. Another story for another time. But it was the combination of all of that goodwill of people from the past, people in the present, and looking towards the future that reminded me that I am on assignment and that I must run this race at least one more good time. And so Sister Turner is in it, baby. We're going to do this one more good time. And no matter what happens, they can rest assured that as long as God gives me breath in my body, I am not going anywhere. I am embodying the station of hope.
Well, that's why we love you. You're a star among so many people in the progressive movement, people who want to see the kind of humanitarian values that you stand for turned into public policy, people who want to see that shift from an economic to a humanitarian bottom line. I think a lot of people felt after you did not win in that special election, maybe I should have done a little more. What could we have done to help her more? Is there anything you want to tell those who already are on board with you, who know you, to whom you're not a new face here, as so many of the candidates are here tonight? What do you need from us? Obviously money. People know about the donate button. Do you need people to come to Ohio? What do you need? Tell us how we can help you.
I would love that. Time, talent, and treasure. Definitely putting some money towards the mission. If people can do phone banking, just giving of their time, they can go to my website, ninaturner.com. Whatever people can do, where they are with what they have is what we need. I do believe that if everyday, ordinary people put a little extra on their ordinary, extraordinary things can happen. And we know that when somebody serves in Congress, even though they are elected from a district, Marianne, we know that they represent the entire country and even the entire world. And so I need that people power to come back to my rescue this time around and to help us over the finish line. Yes, us over the finish line. So go to ninaturner.com and get involved any way that you can. It would be greatly appreciated.
Well, I know that I speak for thousands and thousands of people who so hope that we will get you across the finish line and who feel in our hearts that we'll be able to this time. I know you're in California. I know you're doing some fundraising tonight. I know people out there love you and want to talk to you. So thank you so much for being with us. So appreciate it.
Thank you, and to all the sisters, seize the house, baby. Thank
you, Senator Turner.
Thank you.
You know, Briahna, you have talked about the disappointment and the emotional, drama that we all go through. Think about what a burst of energy it will be for so many people if we can get Nina Turner into Congress.
Yeah, it's hard. I was thinking as she was describing Cleveland as this beacon of hope, I was thinking of my family's roots there and how my mom recently got into Ancestry.com. And there was this presumption that, okay, we came with the Great Migration like so many black families from the South, and that is true. My grandmother came from South Carolina. But what she also discovered was another prong of the family had migrated to Cleveland to fight in the U.S. colored troops. And this idea of one of my ancestors coming up from the South to fight for his own freedom in the Civil War, and that history of Black Americans committing to this American dream and this American ideal over and over and over again, and finding themselves disappointed that they're willing to put their lives in the lines in some instances, like this ancestor of mine, to not have the promise fulfilled. And I think that a lot of people who have lost hope, I don't keep bringing it up to be pessimistic, but just to honor that there are people who really did invest and who have really good reason to be frustrated. And why I'm really excited about the line of questioning that we're doing tonight is to give voice to those concerns and to let candidates who I think really do have an alternative vision for the future and who are, like Jason called, really willing to be adversarial and who really do have a different plan of attack than some of the candidates that we've seen elected already, to demonstrate that people who have a legitimate point in being disappointed can find renewed hope in other people that come down the pike. So I'm grateful for this.
I also think that sometimes people who are critical of electoralism are selling other things short. Like for me, it's just so clearly part of many moving pieces, right? And that I don't expect everything to come from electoralism, and that it's not this end-all, be-all. I mean, it's significant, but again, these things act in concert. You couldn't have had the major electoral gains without the movements on the streets. And I think that, there's this discourse around sheepdogging that we hear a lot, which is basically the idea that we're funneling people into supporting the Democratic Party, and they'd otherwise be doing something much more valuable. But the problem is we don't actually have enough of the infrastructure of those other more valuable things. I think we need to bring those, but it's not like, and create those, but it's not like, but for doing this, people would be out in the streets or in, labor militants and involved in the great labor movement that we have. Our labor movement is dead. We need to revitalize it. We need to make it less corporate, less of an arm of the Democratic Party. And so all these things have to happen at the same time.
Even to your point, I do cover people who are out in the streets in these movements, and these are like there's only one running for the seat in Connecticut. So there's still a large group of people doing that kind of activist work.
Sure.
It's not a zero sum like, we should keep it all on the outside of the steps of
yeah, and someone like Rebecca clearly does both. I mean, she's been
so
on House, she's
Rebecca,
been an organizer, she's been taking over buildings. Yeah.
When I alluded earlier to one of the candidates who had called into my call-in show and talked about the barriers to running as a third-party candidate, it was Rebecca Parsons, and she gave just like a really honest, open accounting of the challenges that she faced. She seriously considered running as not a Democrat, as a third-party candidate. And I think it's important to have those conversations because I think a lot of our audience probably heard her start talking and met her with a lot of skepticism. But as she explained, it became clear that she had made a choice that wasn't rooted in wanting to be a Democrat and kind of sheepdogging people in the Democratic Party, but realistically wanting to get in there.
I ran for Congress as an independent, and I ran for Congress as an independent for all the reasons we're talking about. I was standing on principle, in order not to participate in the duopoly. And I realized in retrospect that that was a very naive choice in that particular district at that particular time. Sometimes candidates have to make a choice. Do I really want to have a chance of getting elected here? Or do I run as an independent? Not in all, in some districts it's a conceivable thing to do. But the institutional obstructions are so great because of the unholy alliance of the Democratic and the Republican Party. So, when you think of what people have gone through just to get the vote, I think that we shouldn't be apologizing either for the fact that we are actually standing for that as well. These people who are running, and I think you can tell this already tonight from the people who are candidates, they are not people who do not understand these questions. They're not, like you were talking about Rebecca Parsons, they're not people who are naive or who are, like you were talking, sheep-dogging for the Democratic Party. I don't think anybody here or any of these candidates doesn't understand the problems with the Democratic Party. I know I do. But sometimes you need some sophisticated analysis and you need to deal with some juxtaposing gnarly truths and do what it takes to get where you need to go. It doesn't mean you're sacrificing your principles.
Yeah.
Certainly these candidates
And there's just, I think a lot of this talk is about feelings, which is fine, but we should kind of own that. We should own when we're talking about feelings and frustrations and when we're actually just talking about power and how power works and how we can wield power. And the left has a lot of building to do.
Is it also possible that part of the propaganda machine to dampen the excitement about people who might have a decent,
maybe?
Absolutely. I don't trust some of these voices.
Come on.
I wonder where they really come from.
Exactly.
As far as being upset, you think that the people who walked across the bridge at Selma weren't traumatized? You think that the women's suffragettes who were thrown in prison for marching for women's suffrage, for whom the conditions in the prison was so horrible that they went on a hunger strike, and the response of the prison officials was to send men into their cells, force these metal contraptions on their necks to force feed them. I think that they knew something about anxiety. They knew something about fear. They knew something about disappointment and trauma, but they kept going. I think in some ways we do need to toughen up a little bit, honor the disappointment, but also, as a friend of mine said not too long ago, toughen up, buttercup. This stuff isn't easy, but we aren't doing it because it's easy. What did JFK say? We're not doing it because it's easy. We're doing it because it's hard. Yeah. You have Christine Olivo waiting for you, Briahna.
I think they're still setting
They're setting up her shop, but I'm really excited to interview her today. I had the pleasure of meeting her. You introduced me to exactly her apartment earlier. I guess that was last year. And I'm always interested to talk to people, particularly from red states, especially a state like Florida, where we get a lot of this narrative that it's so conservative, nothing good can happen there. Hello, Christine. But we also know it's a state where where a $15 minimum wage passed with 60% of the vote, even as Donald Trump won. Christine, welcome, and tell me a little bit about what's going on in Florida's 24th district.
They're trying to silence you. They're trying to silence you already.
You don't have sound yet, Christine.
Or no sound, yeah.
But
this is one of the many obstacles you face as a non-corporate candidate is you don't have that.
If you can't handle a mute button, now you're going to handle, Mitch McConnell.
Well, let me set you up a little bit more while they're getting her sound together. Christine is running against, I think, probably one of more kind of notable, name-recognized, visual incumbents of the group, Frederica Wilson, who you might remember as the woman with the big sparkly cowboy hat.
Cowboy
that
hat.
Seen around.
Frederica Whitfield.
Yeah, and this is what this is one of those races where typically when you see an incumbent situation like this, the narrative that you get from the Democratic Party is very much an identity politics narrative. How dare you challenge this a black woman who's been in office for 22 years, yada, yada, yada. But here we have a young black woman doing the same thing. And I'm really interested to see how this plays out. Christine, welcome back.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Yes.
Right, so tell me a little bit about this race. What is going on in your district that motivated you to run, and what are their biggest barriers to entry?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. The barriers to entry is being a regular person that's not a millionaire.
Mm.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of money. Nobody cares to donate to you. If you're running against a well-liked incumbent, nobody cares to donate to you. But the thing that they don't understand is that I'm a fighter. Like, I'm born and raised in this district. You're not going to shut me out, and you're not going to shut me down, period.
Yeah, what's so interesting to me, it seems to be a pattern that in a lot of the districts that are represented very famously by these long-time incumbent Black Democrats in particular, they're some of the poorest in the country. I recently interviewed a young man who's running against Jim Clyburn in South Carolina, for instance, on Bad Faith podcast. And when he was reading off the statistics of the district, it really painted a picture of how underserved the district has been by somebody who never gets any pushback or interrogation about why it is that the people in this district are suffering so mightily. So what do you have to say about the job that the incumbent has done in Florida's 24th?
So I'm so glad you brought that up. We were looking at the census data, and we saw that a decade ago when the incumbent took office, the median household income was $41,000. And now, 10 years later, the median household income is $44,000. So you tell me, when we have the housing prices and rent going up 38%, but the income is not, the minimum wage is still $10 now. Who can live off of this? We have 3 families living in one home. I know it because I grew up in it. And what frustrates me right now, I'm a substitute teacher, hence why my voice is gone all day long. I'm like, sit down. but sorry, I froze. The problem right now with the district is that people are tired, people are hungry, people are frustrated, and they're at the point where they don't even realize that all of their answers lies in their vote. They keep voting for the same person over and over and over again and not realizing that their situation has never changed. And the frustrating part is she's so well liked because of her hat. Oh, the woman with the hats? Of course I'm going to vote for her. And I said, oh, really? How's your job? Do you get time off? Do you have a raise? When's the last time you had a raise? How's your household? Do you have insurance? A quarter of our district doesn't even have health insurance. It's so frustrating to me to see people that continuously vote for the same people over and over and over again, and they are unhealthy, they are borderline broke, and at the end of the day, they can't even keep a roof over their heads for their kids. So I say all of that to say, I don't even know, and this is the first time I'm saying this, I don't even know if I'm going to be in the 24th district because Florida is so red that the gerrymandering here is going to push part of District 24 into a Republican district.
Okay, so what does that mean for you in your race?
That means that I have to wait another month or so until they decide what the new lines are going to be. Right now, Ron DeSantis is dead set on making sure that there are 18 plus Republican seats in Congress. And he's not budging. He's ready to veto anything that comes to anything that resembles minority districts getting their fair representation.
You ran previously, and I was looking at your Ballotopedia, and it seems as though you ran as a third-party candidate the last time. Is that right?
I did. I ran as a non-party affiliate, mainly because the Democratic Party was not letting me in. I'm a normal person, right? I'm a mother of 2 beautiful boys. I'm a teacher. I am a low-income family. And here I am trying to find my way into Congress. They weren't having it. And it was very hard for me to run as a Democrat. So I said, you know what? I don't need anyone to open up doors for me. If I have a window, I'll go through that window. And I ran as a non-party affiliate. It was the most rewarding experience because I felt at home there. I could challenge the Democratic Party and find people that actually resonated with that message. But they weren't voting that way. This district is vote blue no matter who. That is what they have ingrained in the voters' minds. And I understand that people say, oh, you're running as a Democrat, you're a sellout. No, I'm not a sellout, because at the end of the day, Twitter is not going to win my election. The voters are going to win my election. I have to fight with the people in this district, and the people in this district, they're not at that point where they can accept an independent candidate. They can't.
Help people who are listening to this understand how they can support you to break through, because it is an uphill battle. It sounds like there's a right-wing attack, and obviously you have to deal with the conservative, blue dog incumbent. What would help you the best? Do you need money for ad campaigns? Do you need money for staff and door knocking? What is it that could actually help you make a difference here?
What would really make a difference is if these major companies, organizations that say that they support progressive candidates actually supported progressive candidates. And I'm just going to be real, because we have people like the Workers' Families Party, or we have people like Justice Democrats. We have all these amazing organizations, and they are still choosing to side with establishment Democrats. We need these major organizations to endorse candidates like myself. And I want to give a shout out also, because she's not here tonight on the panels, but Queen Johnson, running in New York, District 8. Queen Johnson is another one that, for an interview, for an endorsement, and they endorse a corporate Democrat over a progressive. We need organizations to back us up.
Yeah. Well, Twitter isn't real life, but for those of you who are listening who want to start applying some of that pressure in the ways that Christine just described, please do that. Christine, thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope people follow you. Let people know where they can find you and continue to support you in your efforts.
Thank you. You can find me on the streets knocking on doors, but online you can find me at christineforcongress.org. And I just want to say, this is the time to people in Congress. No one's going to fight for you if they haven't lived your experiences. This is the time for you to say enough is enough, and let's get people that resemble us. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Wow. One of the people that Christine just mentioned is Queen Johnson in New York. And if you go to thehouse.com and you look down at all the candidates, she's one of them on there, one of our endorsed candidates. You'll see her video. She's quite wonderful.
That website is wonderful. I want to sing your praises for a second, Marianne, because you have done such an amazing job selecting all of these candidates.
Thank you.
And that website is so professional and is such an easy portal to access so much useful information about all of these candidates, from candidate videos, platform profiles, the whole thing. I really encourage people to go and visit.
Shout out to Howie Klein and to Adam Christensen for putting all that together. So thank you guys.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Katie, you're up.
All right, so we got another great candidate who I'm very excited to welcome into the fold. Shervin Azami is a dad, husband, public health activist, immigrant, and community organizer, and he's running for California's 32nd district. Shervin, welcome.
Hi there, Katie. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Something that you talk about on Twitter, on your website, and your literature is that you say that, quote, poverty is a policy choice. Can you explain what you mean by that and how that has influenced your worldview and is influencing your campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. But I want to first start out by thanking you all for the opportunity to interview so many amazing candidates, so many important stories. Tell you exactly what I mean. We are coming out of the worst public health crisis in over a century. Millions of Americans lost their jobs, lost their wages, lost their health care, lost their housing. 8 out of 10 Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Rent is unaffordable anywhere living on minimum wage. 1 in 5 Americans have medical debt, 45 million have student loan debt, and thousands more can't afford childcare, don't have paid family leave, and are just struggling to survive. Here in Los Angeles, in our district, we have 44 unhoused Angelenos, disproportionately black and brown. We have 5 unhoused neighbors die per day in our city. Yet our legislators never bat an eye to finance $778 billion for endless wars to line the pockets of defense companies and military contractors financing the military-industrial complex. $277 billion annually on policing and incarceration. You know what we could do with that money? With just the money we spent this year on the Pentagon, we could eradicate homelessness in America. We could enact tuition-free public college and university. We could pass a Green New Deal for public housing, a Green New Deal for public schools, a Green New Deal for cities, states, and tribes, universal child care, and we could modernize all of our public transit systems nationwide and still have nearly $400 billion left over. So you want to tell me poverty is not a policy choice? Our budgets inherently reflect our values. And what I'm tired of, what our voters are tired of, what the American people are tired of, are saying that we're going to means test programs for the poor, we're going to deny them eligibility, we're going to continue decreasing their funding while we write blank checks to Wall Street corporations and the defense contractors to continue barreling us from conflict to conflict to conflict. And that's what myself, everyone on this call in this meeting are here to change, to say enough is enough. Our democracy is in peril, and we have to take it back into the hands of working class people to uplift and empower working people, dismantle white supremacy, and end corporate welfare. And that's what our campaign's all about.
Your parents are from Iran. You were born in Bologna, Italy. Do you think that you have a more internationalized view of the world, and how does that upbringing shape your politics today?
Yeah, my parents were teenagers when they fled religious persecution in Iran during the time of the revolution with nothing but the clothes on their backs. My mom, as a teenager, became caretaker to her 2 younger brothers, and I watched them make every single sacrifice to build a better life for myself. And as a son of asylum seekers, my family has lived firsthand the consequences of U.S. imperialism and militarism abroad. And so that is the worldview that informs the work that I do. And I always say I learned the power of responsibility from my mother, who worked in retail 7 days a week to make ends meet for our family, and the power of service of my father, who went back to school when he was already a physician in Italy, started from scratch here in America, went back to school, and became a primary care physician. And so looking through their struggles, and here in Los Angeles, where we have the largest population of Iranians outside of Iran, lovingly referred to as Tehrangelis, yet my opponent, the incumbent, still touts the fact that he voted against diplomacy and voting against the Iran deal. He still touts crippling economic sanctions. He has voted for both the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He voted against ending U.S. aid to the Saudi-led genocide in Yemen. And he never bats an eye to continue providing more and more and more money to the apartheid Israeli government. Our people are suffering. And it's beyond time for us to take those dollars and put them back, invest in the basic needs of our communities so that no one's zip code dictates their fate.
And tell us what made you want to run in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a son of immigrants growing up here in the district in working class neighborhoods, I've always fought for social justice through the lens of public health. And before running for office, I was legislative director on Capitol Hill for the only national indigenous healthcare nonprofit, fighting to make sure that our government honors its treaty obligations to tribal nations. And I'm proud to say that I got more bills passed in 2 years as an advocate than the incumbent has in 26 years as a legislator, including bills that canceled copays and deductibles for Native veterans, guaranteed long-term funding for community health centers, and for the first time in U.S. history during a public health crisis, actually delivered direct aid to indigenous communities to the tune of $10 billion. And it was through doing that work at the national level that I really saw firsthand how poverty is a policy choice. And I became sick and tired of just tinkering around the edges, sick and tired of incrementalism, and learned how really the only barriers to enacting these bold structural progressive reforms are political cowardice and corporate greed. And that's what we are here to change, and what everyone else that's been interviewed so far is here to change.
How can we make sure that we hold progressives accountable once they're in office? I think you hear a lot of people who are frustrated with some of the behavior of the squad. So what is your answer to that criticism? And also, what do you want us to do so that when you are in power, you don't sell us out?
Yeah, absolutely. So our entire platform is rooted in the discipline of co-governance, where our platform directly speaks to and was informed by the voters in our district and our communities. And throughout this entire process, we've made sure that as we move forward, we're always working with and for our communities and always having a process whereby we are transparent and upfront with our communities about the barriers that are there and how we can work together to solve them, giving folks opportunities to get civically engaged and to say, look, at the end of the day, we have to take control and move this movement forward as a collective. I reject the idea of any one person solving all of our problems. I don't believe in the savior complex. What I believe in is the power of the people. And holding folks accountable means that we are always sharing our votes and describing why we're voting a certain way with our constituents. We're always maintaining an open door policy, providing multiple opportunities for voters to get involved, learn about where we stand, learn about what's going on, and hear directly from us about opportunities to get engaged within our communities. And that's what accountability is all about.
Thank you so much, Shervin, and best of luck.
Thank you for having me.
Wow.
Okay.
How you like that answer, Bree?
I think that he hit on a good point. Like, it's the accountability mechanism.
Right.
And people have talked about, well, if someone's a DSA candidate or a Justice Democrat candidate, is there going to be a relationship where the tail doesn't wag the dog, where one of those organizations has the power to get the person back in line or call them out at the very least or in their membership if they don't vote and behave accordingly to the rubric of those organizations. So.
Hey, listen, everybody, I made a mistake I have to correct. Christine Olivo's opponent is Frederica Wilson. I said it was Frederica Whitfield, who is an anchor on CNN.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry about that. Okay, over to you, Julianna.
Okay, well, I'm very happy to be talking to our next person, Ruth Luevanos from California's 27th. Ruth, thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me?
I can. So, mother, wife, teacher, union leader, activist, law school graduate, scout troop leader, first Latina ever elected to the Simi Valley City Council. And I think I heard you say you had 3 jobs.
Well, my full-time job is a teacher. I've been teaching for over 22 years. It's called a part-time job as a Simi Valley City Councilwoman. And I also I'm a partner in a company that my sisters and I started. We're all Latinas, we're all Mexicans, and it's called Sisterhood for Equity. So yeah, 3 jobs.
3 jobs. Sometimes I feel we can get more done when we're doing a lot, somehow.
Yes.
Well, you know, I want to get right into it because you bring so much to the table. As a teacher, you teach social studies and you tell the class right up front, this is not your Disney America. Is that what it is? Or this is not your Disney history? Talk about that.
Yeah. I tell them, you know, you're going to learn real history here. I work at a continuation school. We just enrolled 8 new students today. And so, you know, at the ethnic studies class and the world history class, I tell them, hey, this is not a Disney history class. There may not be a happy ending. Like, I'm going to teach you real history. And that's really important, especially right now when teachers are under attack. We have 9 states that have passed legislation, holding us personally and legally liable for teaching anything that would make anyone uncomfortable. The Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, you know, which I'm not going to follow that, you know, because these are my students. We know that LGBTQ students are at the highest risk of depression and suicide. We know that our immigrant students need a place where they feel comfortable. You know, our intersectional students need places where they're comfortable. So teachers are under attack right now. We need one of us in Congress that's going to push back on that legislation, that's going to make sure that we can teach all the history, the real history.
Absolutely. Let's talk about climate change. You've said that you want to tackle climate change with an emphasis on the environmental racism part. Can you talk about your platform around that?
So in the 22 years that I've been a teacher, I know personally that a lot of the the drilling and a lot of the, fracking that they want to do and a lot of the chemicals that they release, are in communities of color because they know that they're disenfranchised communities, that they can't fight back, that they don't have representatives that are going to fight for them on their behalf. And so as someone who lives in Ventura County but works in Los Angeles County, I see this all the time, from the Aliso Canyon gas leak, where they won't even talk about, addressing all the people that have gotten cancer, to the Santa Susana Field Lab, a nuclear meltdown that happened less than 5 miles from my home, to the drilling and fracking that is happening all over Ventura and LA County. These are things that impact communities of color. most disparately, and especially our students. You know, we have schools that are right next to places where they're dumping pesticides, where they're drilling, where they're fracking, and they think because they're low-income schools and they're students of color that no one's going to fight back.
And the incumbent hasn't had an effective response to these things?
No, quite the opposite. It's a big, you know, he's taken a lot of money from the defense industry. You know, Boeing is out there and Northrop Grumman is up there. I've been fighting a personal fight against Boeing, NASA, and the Department of Energy to clean up their nuclear mess at the Santa Susana Field Lab, specifically because we've had so many children that have died of cancer, so many friends and family that have died of cancer. I'm a cancer survivor myself, and I was just at a regional water board meeting fighting for them to stop the 300 carcinogens that are coming into our watershed here in Simi Valley and West Valley, because they forgave Boeing's $127,000 fine, even though Boeing made $86 billion in profit last year. So is it fair to ask someone to pay for, you know, $170,000, $200,000 in chemotherapy for cancer, but Boeing can't pay a $127,000 fine for discharging carcinogens into our water? That's not okay.
No, it's not okay. Absolutely not. And it's so nice that you're bringing that right to the surface and that you're running on this great platform. And I wish you all the best. I hope that you win Ruth Luevanos on California's 27th district. You can go to seizethehouse.com and find out more information about Ruth. Thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
And once again, when you're looking at the seizethehouse.com site, go up to that donate button, please, and do what you can to help these people. Over to you, Briahna. You've got a great one next.
All right. Well, we have Daniel Leaf of California's 37th District. He was a Culver City Vice Mayor. He became the first African-American member of the Culver City Council in over 100 years, a veteran of the U.S. Air Force and California Air National Guard. Daniel Lee, I think we're still trying to get connected to him a little bit. Here we go.
I'm ready to roll.
How are you doing? Welcome.
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing well. Look, you are a military man. I'm going to put the question straight to you because I know you can take it. A lot of listeners are probably wondering, what would you do differently than the members of the squad that some people feel like should have done more to advance progressive issues?
Well, I think there's a lot that a number of members of the squad, and for that matter, members of the Progressive Caucus have said about the next generation and shepherding other people in. And I think we've seen the opposite from a lot of the most prominent members, and they've more or less been making friends with the establishment to some degree because they have other, aims. If it's AOC, maybe it's the New York Senate seat. If it's other members of the squad, it's longevity. And I think what we need to see, and I got to credit a lot of members of the squad were actually asking for this, for the Democratic Party to actually stick to its guns, for it to embrace its boldness, for it to put its body on the line as Cori Bush did and say, no, this country isn't just for rich people. This country is for working class people as well. I think voters respond to that. Voters respond to authenticity, and voters respond to politicians who can communicate that they know what they're going through. They know the material conditions that people live in from day to day, and that they haven't improved in decades.
So to what do you attribute that centrist drift? Because a lot of folks sounded great before they got into Congress, right? But does seem to be this corrupting effect of being in Washington. How would you resist that effect, and where do you think that comes from?
Well, I'll start with where it comes from. I think it's just the formula. It's the formula that Bill Clinton used. It's the formula that Barack Obama used. And it's something that I like to talk about, like in the present day, is the difference between a progressive and a faux-aggressive. Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, incredible orators. They can bring you to tears even if you think they're full of shit. But Leo
men, am I right?
Hello.
they know what they're doing when it comes to that. When it comes to the actual policy that they push forward, and this is something that Democrats, long after, whether that be speakers of the House, leaders of the Senate, presidential candidates have done. They've used this lofty language to talk about minuscule piecemeal advances, to talk about incrementalism, essentially, to frame incrementalism and the type in the prose of the type of systemic change that we all have known for a while that we need. And I think the American electorate has been seduced by that, whether that be at the presidential level or the congressional level, because that's the formula. That's how you get in. That's how you stay in. You say the lofty things, and then you do the same things that you've done over and over again. And as a result, people at the bottom, income inequality gets worse. The climate crisis gets worse as we say we're doing something, but then, approve all of these oil and gas permits in the Gulf of Mexico, which of course were thankfully struck down, but I'm sure they'll be back. It's talking out of two sides of your mouth, and it's almost like politics 101, but it comes in different guises each generation.
Well, Daniel, but this is the frustrating thing. So much of the narrative going into 2018 was the reason these candidates ultimately disappoint us is because they take corporate money. Then in 2018, 2020, we got this influx of candidates who don't take any corporate money. And I want to be clear, there are substantive, meaningful differences between them and the traditional blue dog Democratic candidates. And yet they still don't seem to be ringing the alarm bell and taking on an adversarial approach to politics the way we expected. You're hailing from California. We just recently saw this California Medicare for All bill fail. I recently interviewed Ash Kalra about why he chose not to force the vote on that issue. I mean, isn't that exactly the kind of behavior that enables corporate Democrats, even in a progressive state like California, to be able to say, hey, I really am a progressive, because they never actually have to go to the mat on these policies, which are overwhelmingly popular in these districts?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is exactly that. And for California historians, I mean, single-payer healthcare has come up a number of times in recent history, and each time it's been destroyed. But it's usually come up when Democrats have been in the state assembly, state Senate majority, but there's been a Republican governor. Mm-hmm. And in those times, Democrats seem to find their courage, and they seem to, be supermen and superwomen, super people. And be able to go to the mat because they know even if they win, even if they get a TKO, it'll be overturned by the governor. I think there is something to be said about performativity. It is something that is infected, not just in politics, but in activism as well. If we had a longer time, I would talk more about Black Lives Matter and how close it's gotten to the Democratic Party. And the fact that it seems like there was some type of order that more or less said, get out of the streets. But I haven't seen unarmed Black people stop being shot by police officers across the country. I think there's still urgency there. There's still urgency around income inequality, and there's still urgency around the climate crisis. What we don't have is people who are willing to act on that common knowledge.
Well, Daniel, I would love to continue this conversation on bad faith. I'm sure other people would love to talk to you on their platforms because there's a lot remaining to be talked about. People who want to learn more about you should, again, go and to theseizethehouse.com and learn more. Thank you so much for joining us today, and good luck.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Wow, love that.
Our next candidate is Allie Dulcimer. She's running in Virginia District 11. Allie, hi, how are you?
Well, Alice about to come.
I'm sorry, she's about to come, but she's not. Should we go on to Christina?
No, they're just setting up the shot.
Okay, all right, well,
that was like music to my ears when he said that Obama and Clinton are brilliant orators.
Bring tears to your eyes even when they're full of shit.
Yeah, that's a nice sign that you're not full of shit.
How many con men do we have to go through in this country?
That you admit both of those
my whole life
they are really good.
I feel like we're back in the dating episode.
But I think we have to be honest about that. You got to be honest, like with men. You got to be honest about what if they're suckers or if they're whatever, if they're good smooth talkers.
You're not going to change them.
No, you just got to be honest about it. Like we have to say that Clinton and Obama were good.
We're going to do a panel on that. We're going to do a panel on
Let's just admit what they're good at. They're good speakers and they're bullshitters and they're full of shit. We have to know that. and then we can acknowledge that they did terrible
I mean,
things.
those people we're talking to are totally not full of shit, and it's so refreshing.
It is.
And,
Yeah.
you know, here's
Okay,
another one.
speaking of not full of shit, speaking of not a man, speaking of a woman who would be the first to represent her district since 1995, that is my friend Allie Dulcimer running in Virginia, District 11. Hello, Allie. How are you, darling?
Hi, Marianne. How are you doing? I'm thrilled
Fine.
to be here, so thank
Well,
you.
I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad to have the opportunity to introduce you to people. Everyone is aware that the environmental crisis is the existential crisis of our era. It is an existential threat to our democracy, to our planet, and to our species. And yet there is not one environmental expert who is sitting in Congress. You would be that person. You have a long career as a national resources expert. You were on President Obama's White House Climate Council. You have a master's in public policy, environmental law, as well as economics from Georgetown University. But you're running against someone who's been there for many years, a nice guy, but even all these people who tell me what a nice guy he is don't seem to know a lot of money he's taken from various corporate sources. So I'm going to throw it over to you to tell us more, not only about your background, but about why you are the person who should replace this opponent.
Right. Well, thank you so much. As you said, I do have 30 years experience working as a natural resources expert. I've developed and established several national and international conservation initiatives. I've received a number of awards, including the Al Gore Hammer Award. I did serve on the Obama Climate Task Force. I've authored or co-authored over 50 subject matter publications. And the fact is that I actually have more climate and natural resources expertise than anyone, not only serving in Congress, but than anyone who's ever run for Congress. And when the climate crisis is existential, meaning our existence is at risk, we have got to have people like me in Congress.
That's exactly right. We have got to have people like you in Congress. Your opponent has been there for how long?
My opponent has been there for well over a decade. And I'll tell you that in that time, he has passed exactly one piece of substantive legislation. He's in the top 10 for taking money from companies that profit from war, and then, not surprisingly, has voted for every war and for every DoD budget increase. With one exception, he has never faced a Democratic primary. So it's been very interesting watching this race and watching how he has pivoted and changed and evolved because I am in this race, which is positive, but it's not enough. And it's not enough because even though people know who he is, they don't really know where he stands on issues, not least of which because he does tend to mislead them about his positions. For example, he says he supports healthcare, but he's on record as saying he will never support Medicare for all. He says that he is for the Green New Deal, but he takes money from oil and gas companies. He says that he is for voting rights, but he voted against the amendment to restore voting rights to the incarcerated and the post-incarcerated. And in terms of the environment and the oil and gas, I mean, I've signed the No Fossil Fuel Pledge. I've signed the Activate Virginia Green Pledge. It's why I'm a Virginia Green New champion, Virginia Green New Deal champion, and he is not. So I think you have to look at actions, which always speak louder than words.
I think it's just indisputable. How could anyone argue with the fact that we need somebody in Congress with your kind of understanding and expertise when it comes to environmental issues? There are people making choices about our environment who really know very little about the science, have very little background in knowing what needs to be done. And it's one thing to call in people who are advising you, but we need people actually sitting in those chairs who would do the work. You have this background, you know what to do. And to all of you who are listening to Allie, I hope you'll go to that donate button. I hope that you will check out her website. I hope that you will do everything you can to help get this woman to Congress. Because that's really what's going on here in a case like this, Allie, isn't it? It's just you can get there if enough of us help you get there, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, we need people to come together to recognize that we have to prevent corporatists like my opponent from saying that they supporting the people, but really don't. You know, if someone had said to me 2 years ago that I would be running for public office, I probably would have laughed in their faces, because the reality is that I am not doing this because I want power or influence. I'm doing it because there was a need and because it was the right thing to do and because no one else was stepping up. So I did. I stepped up because I needed to be the change that I wanted to see. And I think that if we all step up and do what we need to do, together we can do it.
Well, maybe you're not doing this for power and influence, but we're doing this so that you can have power and influence. Thank you. Much love to you, Ali. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, team.
Thanks.
I do have to say, my husband is a scientist, and it would be wonderful to have some science people also as part of the conversation on the Hill.
Not just lawyers and business people?
Yeah, no, actual
What a
people
shock.
who
What a
care
shocking
about the
thought.
world.
Poverty lawyers would be good too. If we're gonna have
Yeah,
lawyers.
human rights lawyers.
Good
Yeah.
public defenders.
Yeah.
With Sergio. I feel like we're like I got to raise more money for my guy. I'm like,
Sergio,
Sergio.
right.
Sergio's a poverty lawyer.
Well, you know how to do it. Tell people to go to that donate button.
go hit
Seize
that
the
donate
house.
Watch the rest of our shows. We have other shows
too.
because
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
all going to be having these people on, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
that's
the
true.
conversations
I hope
have
you
to
will.
go
And also, there's so many
further.
other people. Maybe a
Oh,
girl
yeah.
who will be the first transgender
she's great. She's
member
running
of
against Adam
Congress.
Schiff.
She's absolutely fantastic. We just were so filled with people. But please check out all the people on the seizethehouse.com site. There are, just as these people here are so great, so are the others. So check out their
Well,
videos.
I got to bring in another one. I got another gal coming for us.
This
All
is a
right,
good
let's
one.
bring in. This is very exciting. So Christina Garcia is a community activist, math lover, former teacher, and current assembly member running in California's 42nd district. Christina, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. Can you tell us how you first got involved in politics?
So my political life is based on experience. Prop 187 was anti-immigrant, and I live in a blended immigrant household. My dad was undocumented for many years, and I remember those experiences. And so I was out there in high school leading my school walkouts against Prop 187. And that's led a lot of the work that I do now. As a legislator, I've been working on my experience as a woman and being taxed for being born with a uterus. And I have been leading the nation in menstrual equity out there, both to get rid of the tax, but also increase access, and then just destigmatize our biology. My uterus, my period is not something that I should be ashamed of, something that I need to hide, or something that's dirty.
So you brought that up. Let's talk about that. Why is menstruation a political issue? How is it a political issue? What are the issues, the economic issues, the material issues that are related to it?
Yeah, well, our budget and our tax code is a reflection of our values. And so across the nation, we've been taxing those who menstruate for being born with the uterus for many, many years. And I think it's a reflection of how we don't value women, how we don't value menstruators. And we've been told that it's something that's dirty. And I think all of that rhetoric is how we are controlled and how the patriarchy keeps us down in reality out there. And so we get to work on tax code to get rid of taxes. We get to work on tax code to improve access. But really, I get to use my soapbox to talk about issues that maybe are scary to people, but that are long overdue. And so I haven't been afraid to do the work for a long time. I tell people I'm a workhorse and not a show horse. I'm running against a show horse who will tell you everything you want to hear, but when it comes down to doing the work, he does the opposite. When I was fighting to shut down incinerators in my community, he was fighting to get one permitted in his community out there. Now suddenly he's trying to say he's about the environment, environmental justice, because it's the cool thing to say, because we all have to be a progressive in California.
And can you talk about the massive corruption scandal that took place in Bell Gardens, the city which you're based in?
Yeah, so my area has been dubbed the corridor of corruption, and we have many local electeds who have taken advantage of the community and have stolen millions of dollars along the way. In 2011, when the LA Times broke the story about the city manager earning nearly $1 million, community members and I got together to start Basta, and we forced a recall. We got tax dollars back. We got a whole new government in, and we've been doing the work. And now that city has been deemed one of the most transparent and has the most sunshine in the state. I didn't know how to organize. I'm a math teacher by trade. I love numbers. But I think just like the rest of my community members, we talk about Mexican ingenuity and immigrant ingenuity. When there's a need, we just step up and we do the work that we have to do and we figure it out. Failure has never been an option. Nothing gets handed to us. We always get told that we deserve crumbs, or we deserve to live in pollution, or we deserve corruption. But I believe that I deserve, the same rights as everybody else.
And finally, what is your favorite number and why?
Yeah, so my favorite number is 2, and it's a little personal. 2 is the only even prime number, so it's a number that beats to its own drum in that family. But 2 is also the foundation for all the even numbers for an infinite family, and so it's a leader of infinite numbers out there, and it's fearless. And so it's one of my favorite numbers. It reminds me a little bit about my work here in the Capitol. I've been independent and fearless about the work that I do, and not afraid to talk about things that might be hard. But I also know that this is a team sport, and I figured out how to get enough votes to get big legislation done every year.
Thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you.
That was so sweet. I got a little emotional over number 2.
Yeah, well, I have some to tell you because the next person up is from District 2 in North Carolina. Erica Smith in North Carolina. I don't know, is Erica with us? Is Erica?
Yeah.
She'll be here in a second.
I have to
Just
say,
wait
this is like
2 seconds.
Again, this is like the speed dating of candidates, except you don't have to pick one.
Yeah.
You can just like
but
roll
we're polyamorous in this case because we're committing to multiple
You don't have to go.
partners. Yeah. Or we're not
Anyway,
committing.
send
we're
money. They need
we're
money.
interested in.
Like these people.
We're inclusive.
Right. We're pan, poly.
I want to tell
And we're
you a
ready.
little bit
That's
about
what
this
else we are.
wonderful woman coming up now. Erica Smith is running in North Carolina District 2. We were talking earlier about people having a diversity of professional background. Not everybody has to be a lawyer or a business person. This woman has, among other things, a master's degree in religious studies from Howard University. She's a minister. She's been a state senator. She's been an engineer. And there she is. Hi, Erica. How are you?
How's everybody doing?
We're
so
doing
excited
good.
to be here with you.
Well, Erica, you can tell us better than I can tell people what your background is that makes you so ready to take on this job. And also, we want to hear from you, what are you going to do with this job once you have it?
Absolutely. So I am running in North Carolina's 2nd Congressional District. Currently, it is the only swing district in the state, and it's the top 5 swing district in the nation. This is a district that's 100% rural. This district is a district that I grew up in. I represented the majority of this district as a state senator for 3 terms, also as an ecumenical leader, faith-based leader, also as a school board member. So this is a district that I know, and this district knows me. So many communities, rural communities across this nation and across this state have been left behind. They have been hollowed out by corporations and left with pollution. We have been trying to survive off of a dollar store economy and a GoFundMe healthcare system. And so I am here to fight for rural North Carolina, which is very much like a lot of rural districts across this country. I'm fighting for a rural New Deal that promotes strategic infrastructure investments, universal broadband, universal healthcare. I'm fighting for good paying jobs, a Green New Deal that will not only bring millions of good paying jobs, but also allow us to build the energy system of the future. It is a district that's 17 counties, northeastern to north central North Carolina. I am the front runner in this race, and I'm ready to represent our voices and values in Washington, D.C.
Erica, we're personal friends, as I am really with all of these candidates who have been with us for a while. We've all heard about the rural-urban divide. When I ran for president, I was very moved by some of the stories I would hear in rural America, particularly by local mayors. And I learned some history that I had not known before. I learned that before the 1980s, local banks would be really good with farmers. Farmers would say, I didn't have such a good year. The local bank would say, fine, you'll make it up next year. It was during the 1980s when the whole Reaganomics thing happened, the corporate takeover began in earnest. Huge banks would come in that did not have that kind of mercy, did not allow for that kind of flexibility. And what I learned was that banks at that time used to give grant money as well as loans in order to help these rural communities. And I heard so many of the mayors who would tell me during my campaign, Erica, that there are so many young people just starting their families, living on the coast, looking for a great place to raise their kids, looking for a great place to be able to start their businesses away from the more expensive neighborhoods of the coastal communities and so forth. And these mayors were saying, we have everything. If only we had the money, if only we could get the grants, if only we could get the loans to have a better sewage system, to have better sidewalks, to have better electric grid, to have better broadband, to have better schools, etc. I really was so impacted by that Tell me what you're going to tell people when you are in Congress about the needs of rural America and why it is such an important investment for the country as a whole to allow rural America to be all that it can be.
I love Representative Ayanna Pressley as well as Nina Turner, who talk about the proximity to pain. I'm able to articulate the needs of the rural community because I share that common pathway. I grew up on my family's farm. This is a farm that has been in my family since my great grandfather, who lived to be 112 years old. He passed away in 1998, but he purchased the land that his parents were enslaved on.
Oh my gosh.
Not so long ago. I watched the generations of my family members, my grandparents, my great grandparents, give their sweat, their blood, their tears, give everything they had to hold on to this land. I know the struggle for farmers. Farmers have not been provided, particularly minority farmers and women farmers in this area and all across the nation. They have not had the equity and access to the grants. And so I know that I can speak firsthand for those families. The Democratic Party, we have to move toward fighting for working families all over this country, all over this state. So I take that experience with me. My mother grew up on a dirt road. My mother is an octogenarian. She's 82 years old now. Guess what? I grew up on the dirt road that my mother grew up on. It is 2022. That dirt road is still unpaved. I am going to fight to pave roads of opportunities for rural people who have been left behind. That is why I'm fighting for a rural New Deal, which takes a bold action plan to address climate change. I represent in this district, there's the oldest town that was a town that was a municipality, the first municipality of African slaves. And so these African slaves founded the town, incorporated the town of Princeville in Edgecombe County in North Carolina. That community has been flooded out with these 100-year floods that have been coming every 2 years. Hurricane Matthew, Hurricane Floyd, really decimated these communities. They need a fighter in Washington, D.C. who understands a Green New Deal, a rural New Deal that focuses on strategic investments in rural North Carolina so that we can build the economy we deserve.
Well, we hope that you will be there to be that voice for rural America. We hope that Allie will be there as well. The two of you can work together, her on the environmental aspect, not only what the farmers are experiencing in terms of the environment, but so many of the ways that farmers in America, big agriculture, et cetera, coming in there and just decimating this segment of our population, hurting our food, hurting our land, and obviously hurting those people. God bless you. Hope you'll get in there. Remember, everybody, that's Erica Smith, and that's North Carolina District 2.
Yeah.
Fabulous
really
candidate.
Fascinating. Such interesting history, personal history.
Talk about personal history. I know that you are very excited about the personal history of this next candidate.
Oh, I mean, I think the country is excited about the personal history of this next candidate.
I love how she owns it.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if she's, I'm not sure if she's ready for this. I mean, she's emotionally ready. I think they're just setting up the
we are
Alexandra Hunt, where it was setting you up, girl.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I took a little note. We have the people that were have been here before, that we've been talking about: disability organizer, scientist, teachers, tons of teachers, minister, public health researcher, mechanical engineer, math teacher, organizer, disability organizer. I mean.
Biomedical engineer.
Yeah.
And so the point, and once again, we all know this, but we really need to take it in. The people that Julianna was just describing, the professional backgrounds that Julianna was just describing, are not the kind of people who tend to have $1 million sitting around, so that when the DCCC calls and says, can you self-fund, would be able to put in their own money. And they're not the kind of people who are standing for the kind of issues that they're going to get corporate funding for. And that's where you and I come in and why we need to support these people.
Yeah.
Don't forget that donate button. Thank you.
Seize the house, donate. There you go.
It would be really a seize if all these people got in.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
Hello.
Remember when we thought we got, what did we thought we got Donziger free?
Donziger was freed the morning after we did a stream. Why not?
We thought we did it.
Look, we were instrumental. But he did get freed from the halfway house.
We
But I'm going to claim full credit for his getting freed from the halfway house. He's been incarcerated and grabbed so many times, who can keep track of it. But this time, recently, he was put in a halfway house like this week, and then he was freed the day after I talked about him on my show with Paul Haas.
As long as we're talking about people need to be free, free Donziger,
free Stephen Donziger, free Assange, free Leonard Peltier.
And Leonard Peltier, correct.
So we've got to do a stream for him. We really got to do it. All right.
Yeah, I'm in. Are you in?
Of course.
Are you in, Bri?
I'm in.
Okay.
Right. I mean, can you imagine the optics if someone said no? It'd be terrible. So that's a good way to
Who's going to call Krystal? Who's going to ask if she's going like this right now?
In real time. All right. So very excited to bring in Alexandra Hunt. She's a public health researcher, grassroots organizer, and soccer coach running for Congress in Pennsylvania's 3rd District. Welcome, Alexandra.
Hi, thank you for having me. It seems like you all are having a lot of fun.
We are, and we're excited to talk to you. And one of the things that you've gotten some national media attention for is the fact that you openly have discussed the fact that your past includes working as a stripper. Why did you decide to include this in your biography? And also, how did that experience shape your view of the world of politics and your decision to run for office?
Yeah, we'll get right into it. So when I was deciding to run for office, I was really faced with the decision of, do I be upfront with this or do I not? And so I was in community with various sex workers, and they said to me, don't leave us behind. And I think to fall silent on a community is to leave them behind, is to be harmful. So I led with it, and I also didn't want it to be used against me by my opponent. And so in doing that, I've really centered a group that's very marginalized within our community, and I'm having to run a grassroots campaign and also fight back stigma. So how does it shape my views of the world? I think that it allows me to relate to people who have ever been dehumanized by policy, and also who have struggled to survive in the current landscape of the United States. And it really just keeps me grounded and being an everyday person and bringing those experiences to the table.
And what about workers' rights? What kind of firsthand experience did you get from that, and how does that shape your political outlook and different issues for you on your campaign?
Well, I'm very familiar with exploitation, and so workers' rights is something that we're really pushing for and has kind of been a part of who I am for my entire time in the workforce. And so Philadelphia, PA3 is a very strong union city, and it's making sure that our workers are valued and are valued through a living wage, as well as good benefits and as well as rest, is very important to our campaign.
And tell us about your opponent, because he is actually someone who is identifies as a progressive, right? As part of the Progressive Caucus. So explain that.
Yes, he is part of the Progressive Caucus, but there is a clause that if you're actually not progressive, you're supposed to be, in crude words, kicked out. And so some of our biggest differences in our platforms are basically along the line of progressivism. And where we're really strong on universal health care and pushing for Medicare for all, he's taking money from private health insurance companies. We're really strong on environmental justice and pushing for a Green New Deal. He's heavily invested in Exxon and oil companies. We're pushing for restorative justice through criminal legal reform, and he's pushing for broken windows policing. And it's just kind of a very stark contrast, whereas I think we're very aligned with a lot of the progressive movement, maybe a little more to the left within that movement. And he's much more moderate Democrat that really doesn't quite fit in with the ideals of the Progressive Caucus.
So why hasn't he been kicked out yet?
Good question.
We're gonna have to.
I double check every day.
Yeah. And anything else that you want to make sure people know about your campaign, what you're prioritizing, what you're going to fight, also how we can hold you accountable if you do win, what your suggestions for that are?
Well, a big part of our campaign is that I'm the daughter of two teachers, and so I believe that education is the ladder to opportunity, and that's something that was instilled within me from a very young age. we're really fighting for education reform and building that school to opportunity pipeline and ending the school to prison pipeline. And so that involves federal investment into public education, and it also involves union power. And that's really how you build a ladder of opportunity for young people. So that's something that we're very focused on doing within our district and across the nation. And as for accountability, I think that is a very strong piece of restorative justice. And so it comes from any people who are harmed by different policies or political maneuvers, that they come forward and they express that harm and how that can be repaired.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Alexandra.
Good luck, Alexandra.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, honey.
I have a question. Are we not supposed to speak the names of the candidates that they're running against? Because I noticed that they're shy to say who it is, but people don't know what number their districts are. They know who their representative is.
That's a good point. We did talk about Frederica Wilson. Allies against Jerry Connolly. Sure. I mean, there's no reason why people shouldn't.
I just think we should name some names out there.
Okay, name some names.
Progressive in the
Some moderates who are voting for.
If we're talking about who is responsible for actually judging who's not progressive enough to be in the Progressive Caucus, to have a conversation about Pramila Jayapal and the extent to which some of the elected progressives have weighed in on some of these races and offered support to some of these candidates, and how telling it is if they haven't.
Right.
Yeah.
My job, once again, to remind you to go to the donate button, please, at seizethehouse.com.
Yeah,
Sorry,
we got to call
my
him
job
out.
here.
Right.
You're up next.
This is me.
Wonderful, wonderful candidate, Derek Marshall.
I am excited to introduce Derek Marshall from California's 23rd District. He is a community organizer. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you, Briahna. It's great to be here.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what your district is like and what you've seen in your district that made you want to run.
Yeah, for sure. So our district is the 23rd district in California. It is not Kevin McCarthy's district. With redistricting, we have all new numbers. In fact, I see our old number listed right here. I'm pointing to the wrong way, but California 8 is not the district. It's California 23. Our district is super iconic. It's Route 66. It's the Mojave Desert, and for those folks from Southern California, it's Joshua Tree, it's Big Bear, it's Lake Arrowhead. And our district is super diverse. We've got everything here. We've got wealthy white folk, and we've got working class white folk. We've got working class communities of all colors, shapes, and sizes. And it really reflects the nation. One thing I like to say is that we're the front lines of global climate change, and we're also the front lines of the solution to global climate change.
So, Derek, help me understand what's going on in California, because, I'm an East Coaster. I hear the things about California. It's a liberal bastion, blah, blah, blah. Bernie did win it. And then I see things like what happened earlier this month with the California Medicare for All bill. And talking to Ash Kalra, really painted a different picture of who gets elected in the state. Apparently, only 2 members of the assembly don't take corporate money. There seems to be a willingness to only kind of performatively talk about the progressive ideals that the majority of Californians actually support. But there seems to be absolutely no pressure to make people act and vote in a way that's in line with those values. What do you see as the problem there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I've been a Medicare for All activist since SB 562, which was the last attempt that we had here in California to pass the single payer system. Have also, used our campaign's bully pulpit to really elevate consciousness around AB 1400. And what I can say is, from an optimistic perspective, is that we're definitely moving in the right direction. If you take a look at where the progressive movement is today, compared to where it was, even 5 years ago, it's a lot stronger. 5 years ago, when SB 562 was being blocked by Speaker Rendon, there was there was lots of Democratic clubs. It was a controversial thing to be in favor of a single payer healthcare system. Now here we are, 5 years later, 2022, and suddenly, my county, for example, San Bernardino County, voted unanimously to support AB 1400. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. I think that what we need to continue to do is get electeds into power that are going to fight like hell for things like AB 1400, and we need to remind all of us elected that there's a place, and absolutely a place for the street in pushing and holding us accountable once we get elected.
Now, some people think that it's a bit of a shell game, right? That, people will let policy go as far as it can if it's ultimately going to get blocked. If there's a Republican governor, for instance, and it's going to get struck down. People talk about the rotating villain scenario in Congress right now, where it's not really Manchin and Sinema, they're just the fall guys. And some folks say that's what's going on now and why the vote wasn't actually forced on AB 1400. That same question is going to get applied to you and every other progressive who ends up in Congress. How do we know that you're actually going to go to the mat for things instead of doing what some people perceive currently elected progressives are doing, which is to say, okay, this time I'll vote for the Iron Dome and you won't vote for the Iron Dome, and you share which policies you're going to take the hit on and spread around the progressiveness. Why would you be any different?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's a question that I ask myself all the time. And I think that, there's a piece of me that's super optimistic and idealistic. Otherwise, I wouldn't be running for office. I would stay being an activist. It's funny because when I was a staffer on the Bernie campaign, they came to me. It took them 3 times to come back to me being like, hey, we think you should think about doing this thing called running for office because, I have that skepticism. And I think that, you and I share that skepticism about, when it looks like AB 1400 is getting to the final, the final point, and then literally in the last minute that we're listening to it online, it gets pulled. It was, it's totally soul-sucking. And so all that I can do is I can promise that I am going to fight like hell, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to cave. And that's a promise that I make. And, and it's a promise that, I intend to keep, even if it means that, that I'll be a one-termer, because I think that what we need to do is we need to really stand up for what we believe in. And I think that that's what, it's what, well, A, the moral thing to do is, but it's B, it's what the American people expect us to do.
Well, Derek, some people listening I know are going to be thinking, I've heard that before, but I know they'll be keeping a close eye on you to make sure that you are, in fact, held accountable should you get into office. Good luck out there.
When you get into office. When he gets into office.
People who want to support you in that cause can go to the website and donate to your campaign. Thank you again, Derek.
Thanks, Briahna.
Thank you, Derek. So many people are wondering, why is America the way it is? Why can't we get more, more enlightened policies passed? And then you hear the kinds of candidates who we're talking to tonight, and you go, it could be different. And I hope that you're feeling as inspired by all of these candidates as we are. And that's also why I hope you'll push the donate button, even if it's
at seizethehouse.com.
Because that's really what this is all about, giving these people a chance to actually mount the kinds of campaigns that will make them competitive with the corporatists that people say they don't like. But then in that case, you need to support the candidates who are running against them.
When Krystal was here at the beginning of the show, she mentioned how on the right they had the Tea Party.
Yeah,
well, the
right.
Tea Party was Koch
We
brothers.
need chutzpah. We need
We're
our
the Koch brothers of the left.
We need to stop our codependent relationship.
And we need your help to fill the coffers.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Sorry, Marianne.
Well, I've said many times that when I ran for office, some of you probably know, what I learned was that the system is even more corrupt than I knew. But I also learned that people are even more wonderful than I hoped. That's how I felt about the voters, and that's certainly how I feel about these candidates. They are extraordinary. And once again, if you go to seizethehouse.com, there are more on there, and there are more throughout the country. Find out who they are. And the next candidate is someone that I'm very excited about, Neil Walia from Colorado District 1. Neil, welcome. Welcome. I'm glad that you're here with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here, and thank you for hosting this event.
Neil, your story is very moving and very typical of so many people in this country. First of all, your parents immigrated here from India, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And you have received a lot of education in Colorado. You have, I think, 2 master's degrees. You have a lot of expertise now. You've worked 2 governor's offices. You've worked with the National Governors Association. And yet you yourself find yourself shackled by college loan debt, unable to buy the home that you'd like to buy, and so forth. So you are really ground zero of the American experience of so many people in your generation. The mix of your expertise, you have everything that theoretically should get you the American dream, and you find yourself unable to get the American dream. Tell us about that, and tell us how that experience will inform what you're going to do in Congress, and tell us what that's going to be.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the most important place for me to start for people to understand who I am is by telling my story. And, you hit it. I'm the son of Indian immigrants. I'm the first person in my family to be born in the United States of America. And when I was 13 years old, my parents took me and my sister to go visit family in Old Delhi. And on one afternoon, they decided to take us out onto a bazaar. And for those of you who have been to India or familiar with the country, you know that a bazaar means dirt roads. It means stores on your left, stores on your right, tens and thousands of people as far as your eyes can see. And one afternoon, we were walking through a big crowd, and we stumbled upon this young boy. Now, this boy had to have been the same age as I was. He had the same skin color, the same haircut, the same eyes, and yet here this boy was absolutely begging for his life without a single piece of clothing on his body. And I remember looking at that boy in that moment and asking myself, how is it possible that this young man who comes from the same culture, the same heritage as I do, has absolutely nothing, and yet I get to go home every single night to a roof over my head, to clothes on my back, and to warm food in my belly? And I've never stopped thinking about that boy. And the real tragedy of the story that I'm sharing with everybody right now is that story is happening right here in Denver, Colorado. And that reality is what my parents escaped from to come to this country in pursuit of what was known as the American dream. And as you said, Marianne, I have taken all the steps that I've been told to build a better life for me and my loved ones. I've been privileged enough to go to both undergrad and then graduate school here in Denver. I taught for 2 years. I worked for a former governor. That took me out to Washington, D.C., where I spent a handful of years of my career on Capitol Hill. And yet, in spite of taking all of these steps, my life is more vulnerable than it's ever felt. And it's because of what you said. I can't afford to buy a home in the city that I love. Student debt continues to cripple me every single day. And now my parents, my dad's 70, my mom's in her mid-60s, they're both public school educators. They are actively postponing retirement, not only because of the economic insecurities that they face, but because they still feel like they have a role to play in helping their children succeed. And feeling all of these pressures in my own life and knowing that there are millions of Americans across this country who are going through the same thing that I'm going through, if not completely worse, I chose to run for Congress, and that is why I'm running. Our communities here deserve to have a representative who's living their struggles, but more importantly, will fight to fix them as if their lives depended on it, because my life does depend on it. And that's why I'm running, and that's what I'm hoping to take out to Washington, D.C. When I win in our June primary this year.
And your opponents, is there an incumbent there that you're running against, or is this an open seat? What's the story?
Yeah, so I am a Democrat. I am challenging Congresswoman Diana DeGette. She is a 25-year sitting incumbent, someone who I would describe as a corporate Democrat, and someone who takes millions of dollars from corporate PACs. And so we are trying to bring a people-powered grassroots movement here to Denver, Colorado, which is something that the people of our district have been waiting for a long time, and championing all of the transformational progressive policies that so many of us care about, all the way from the Green New Deal to Medicare for all, to a direct approach to tackling homelessness and treating that as a national crisis.
And you have a lot of background in the homelessness issue professionally, of course. I think being in Congress 25 years is long enough.
I would agree.
Absolutely. I wish you the very, very best. Is your entire district in Denver?
Yeah, so I would say that 95% of my voting block is in Denver County. And thank you so much again for the opportunity. And to everybody who's listening, please help me make history here in the Mahi City by electing the first person of color to ever represent this district, but more importantly, the only representative in all of Colorado at the federal level who does not take corporate money. Thank you all again.
And that's what it's all about. God bless you, darling. Good luck to you. Okay. God, Denver's hot and happening, and everybody's in Denver now. And
yeah,
we need somebody like that. We don't need somebody who's been there 25 years.
Mahi City.
I love it there.
I like it.
I
like
there for a
all
little
of
while.
Yeah.
I know. What's not to like?
Yeah, one thing, this is just not to make it serious and a downer, we're having so much fun, but one thing I was thinking of, when you were saying a lot of people gave their lives, women were like tortured for the right to vote, I still think that that people could have sacrificed for something, and that in itself doesn't mean that it's still something we should fight for. But I still think it is something we should fight for.
I damn right think that's something we should.
I
don't know.
Katie,
I'm not into any apologizing for the fact that we're, it is hard to run for office.
Right.
It is hard. What these people are going through every day, and they do not have the money that their opponents have who have incumbency of decades in the House. They do not have the support of the Democratic establishment. Hello? You say you don't like the Democratic establishment? These people are not being supported by the Democratic establishment. These people do not have corporate funding.
I think Katie, the point Katie I think is making, don't let me speak for you,
please.
but there has been a history of some candidates, Democrats, corporate Democrats, appealing to certain communities, in particular Black people, saying, oh, but your ancestors struggled and died for your vote, so you have to come out and vote for whatever horrible shill it is. Joe Biden got up there last year in 2020 and said, you ain't Black if you don't vote for me, right? And invoked that civil rights legacy to pressure people into voting for candidates that aren't good. So I think that Katie is saying these are great candidates and we should vote for them, but not because of that kind of coercive pressure of somebody like fought and died for your rights, but because these are people who actually will fight for your rights and who actually share the values of the people who did go through all those struggles in the past.
For me, it's both. But would you, as a Black woman, please tell Congressman Clyburn to stay the hell out of Ohio this time? Would you please? You have your opportunity. I'm sure he's watching.
Podcast and people. There's 2 people challenging him this time, and it's for the first time.
Good.
And I hope to get the other gentleman on the show as well soon.
Well, he's actually
stay away from the Nina Turner race,
Congress.
sir.
I don't know if you know that about Jim Clyburn is the most progressive person in the entire House of Representatives. That is according to research conducted by Jim Clyburn.
I like his daughter. He has a very, very nice daughter.
Our next candidate is our last candidate of the evening, and I'm sad to say that, but I'm happy that she is able to be here. Melanie D'Arrigo from New York's 3rd District on Long Island. The progressives on Long Island still. I had no idea. I'm sorry. I really wanted to test out my Long Island accent.
That's violence.
That's violence. Listen, well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here with you. I just want to give a quick shout out to Marianne's jacket because it is amazing.
I got it in Austria, so it's not an American. Sorry.
Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes.
Beautiful.
See, on Long Island, that would go people would love it.
Oh, purple, yeah.
People would love it.
So I understand that Long Island is having a blue wave because a lot of young families are moving out and they are bringing their progressive values with them. I also understand that you ran against the incumbent there who is now out of the race. He's running for governor, right?
That's
so
right.
All of the money, I just want to make, because you're really a good example candidate, like we're asking people to give money to you and to the other candidates that were here. And sometimes people at home will be like, well, what are the odds? And you could but you are the example of why you give money, because you didn't win that race last time, but you did use all of that time to build up the name recognition. You got, 30% of the voting public?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need that much more in order to win. That's only 20% more. So, any person we're supporting here tonight, it's about forwarding this movement in addition to locking up those seats. So sorry for the plug about the money on your time, and I'll definitely give you the time. But
I think she wants the money.
She wants the money.
You will take it.
She wants the money.
Talk about what's going on in your district. Do you think the folks are there enough people who are going to support things like Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, the different things that progressives want?
Yes,
when I think Long Island, I don't think that.
Well, listen, I will tell you, as you mentioned, we ran for this seat in 2020, and I think that I'm very representative of Long Island. I'm a lifelong Long Islander. I'm a mom. I'm a community organizer, and we've been building in this district for years. And while you're partially right, in 2020, when I first ran, folks told me that I was crazy for running on Medicare for all, that a progressive could never win. Lo and behold, not only was I the first progressive to run, but also the first woman will be the first woman elected to the seat, which is both infuriating and exciting. But fast forward to today, where, as I said, we've been building for years in this district, and now issues like Medicare for all are polling at the very top. we have changed hearts and minds in this district, and we have done it by doing the hard work of reaching out to our community members, knocking on doors, holding teach-ins and rallies and protests. And I think we've been really successful with the education model that we have enacted here. And certainly we're reaping those rewards right now. So we're very, very excited for our primary in June and what that will mean for New Yorkers and the rest of this country, because I certainly know that healthcare is a human right and everybody deserves it and we need it. We live on an island here. I live on an island. So the climate crisis is coming for all of us. Like it or not, it is here and it's only getting worse. So, this is an issue that I think can really unite us as a country. I know that we certainly have some folks that don't believe in the science, but it's very hard to counteract the negative effects of climate change that we're seeing in communities across this country. So we're hoping to build some bridges there and come together and make this district certainly a real model for climate resiliency.
Well, I hope so, and I appreciate your time coming on the program today. Melanie, I'm sorry we're very short on time, but everyone please support Melanie Diargo at on New York 03, District 03, and we'll have to have you back on our programs, and we'll talk a little bit more. So thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
In addition to thanking my wonderful colleagues here, Julianna Forlano and Katie Halper and Briahna Joy Gray and Krystal Ball, who was with us earlier, I want to thank all of you who have stayed with us, who have watched even part of the live stream. I hope that you will continue this conversation with your friends on your platforms. Please tell people about it. Tell people to go to seizethehouse.com. I hope that you will give generously. We all know what's going on here. The United States has a higher poverty rate than any other advanced nation. We have a higher incarceration rate than any other advanced nation. We have 1 in 4 Americans who cannot even afford to fulfill the prescriptions that have been given to them by their doctors. We are the only advanced nation that does not have some form of universal health care. We know what the climate crisis is. We know the huge income inequality greater than it has ever been. We know that a very tiny portion of our population controls the vast majority of our wealth. The time has come for us to stop just talking about it, though. We absolutely must interrupt the pattern. The status quo will not disrupt itself. We've talked about the various things that are needed. Obviously, a reinvigorated labor movement, which is good to see. We know about all the social justice movements, which are so important and which all of us are part of. We all have to do what we can do and what we feel called to do. I personally feel that voting is one of the areas, electoralism, as people like to say these days, it's undeniably important. As we've said so often here tonight, the terrible amount of human suffering that we see in this country, so much of it is due to bad public policy. And the only way that will change is with good public policy. And the only way that will change is with different people making the policies. So I want to ask my friends here to wrap it up. I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to these candidates. And one more plug, that you look at the seizethehouse.com videos on the candidate page, because you'll see a lot of other wonderful candidates. And I hope that in your district, wherever you live, 435 districts, everybody has a congressional race coming up. Find out who the people are running in your district. And if you find a good one, please support them. Do what you can. They need your help. What about it, girls? What do you think? Did we have a good night?
I think that was fabulous. I'm telling you, everyone knows me. They know that I come to this with a certain degree of skepticism, and I will confess to having that alleviated to some extent, talking to some of these candidates. And I really am looking forward. I was DMing some of the folks as we were broadcasting, saying, okay, will you come on the show this
Fantastic.
Next week? Come on, call in, do whatever. Because these conversations deserve to be a lot longer. And a lot of them have a chance to win if we support them and believe. And I do think it'll make a difference. And we should also ask them the tough questions about accountability and all those other kinds of things.
What their favorite number is.
What their favorite number is. Because I think it helps them in the lot. Long term to
I'm
get
so
the hard
glad
question
to hear it.
Here and now.
That's what I have hoped for the whole podcast community, that there would be more introduction of candidates. Makes me very happy. What about you, Katie? Have a good night?
Great. It was great. I would totally go out with them again. Hope to hear from them. I actually do.
Will they call back? You just never know.
Let's call. Yeah. We'll see.
Juliana?
I had a great, wonderful time. It's a pleasure to be with all of you, live and in person, and even unmasked. I mean, it's like unbelievable. But just to do a service, you know, a lot of people are feeling, myself included, like so much terrible is happening that you just want to help in some way, and we hope that this has supported some candidates to breaking down the barriers that they have to getting progressive policies passed.
And feel free to make a monthly donation to seizethehouse.com. There are so many people who have enabled us to be here. Thank you to the Breaking Points people, Krystal and Sagar. Thank you for allowing us to use the set. Thank you, Eric Nicholas here, and all the people, wonderful people in the control room. Thank you, Lauren Selsky. Thank you, Helen Caddis, for all that you did as well with CandidateSummit.com. Howie Klein, none of these candidates would be highlighted here tonight were it not for the work of the extraordinary Howie Klein and Down with Tyranny blog. You say to Howie Klein, you just name a state, name a district. He can tell you everything that you need to know, who's running, who's the blue dog Democrat, who's the moderate. His mind is an encyclopedia, and I know that what Howie Klein has done for me in terms of education about these matters is inestimable. Thank you, Adam Christensen, for getting the site ready for us the way it is now. Thank you, James Lynch. Thank you, Peter Brown. Thank you, Calvin Underwood. And who wants to have the final words? We have a few minutes. I was the sort of stern clock keeper. We have 8 minutes.
After working at Pacifica, I also know that I need to thank all of the people who've already given the money. I know we're still asking.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Yes. But thank you. I know the money is coming in. Thank you. If you have some problem, you can find Marianne and find me on the internet, and we'll figure out what the issue is.
And thank you for all the people who had given money to these candidates long before tonight as well over the last year. Thank you.
And look, there's probably some folks that would be interested in volunteers. And I know we get people all the time who say, I'm sorry, I'm down to my last $5. I can't donate anymore. And I completely appreciate that it's tough out there. But again, Google real quick. I know some of you don't know. It's okay. What districts you're in, and figure out what's going on, and see if you can lend a support in those kinds of ways as well.
Yeah.
They need you, and if we get these people to Washington, they will do amazing things for all of us.
It'll be a match made in heaven.
God bless you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Good night.